Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Are we live? Yeah. Good evening, I'm Councillor Martin Round, the Chairman of Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? No, we don't have Malcolm here tonight. I ask so that people at this meeting will know if this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated, and members of Democratic Services, Lara, will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Please note that COVID secure arrangements are under constant review at the Town Hall, and in light of increasing infection rates, officers are being advised to attend meetings remotely where possible, and all those attending meetings at the Town Hall are encouraged to wear a face mask unless speaking, eating or drinking. I go to the first item on the agenda, the first one being apologies for absence. I personally have received apologies from Bob Hinder. I've also received apologies of potential lateness by Stan Forecast. Councillor Nagy, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Richard Webb is hoping to make it.
Thank you. That's substituting for who? So, okay, it's noted. So when I go into notification of substitute members, it's noted that Richard will be substituting for Councillor Cox, presumably. Right. Okay, it's now being clarified. Councillor Webb will be sitting here anyway. Right, I see Councillor Cannon's arrived, so we're getting near the numbers again. Right, other notifications of substitute members.
Councillor Burton for Councillor Hinder.
Thank you, David. Okay, item 3. An urgent item for item 17, update for item 17 has been requested. Fees and charges have been put on your desks. Have you all got them? Right. So fees and charges, the update is being put on your desks, which refers to a minor correction to Appendix 1 on page 94 of the agenda pack. As you can see, it is as well as a correction, it is a complete substitution of a page. Right, item 4. Visiting members, we have none. Disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by any members of officers relating to the agenda? No, that's none by all. Disclosures of lobbying Number 6. I certainly haven't been lobbied. Has anybody else been lobbied? No particular issues on lobbying then. Item 7, to consider whether items should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. I move that the items on the agenda be so taken in public as proposed. Are we all agreed? Item 8, minutes of the previous meeting. On the basis that I can take it page by page, but over the 4 pages, everybody agreed on page 1, I assume. Page 2, agreed. Page 3, agreed. And page 4, agreed. One exception, perhaps. Councillor Webb.
Yeah, no issue with the minutes at all, but I did think at the end of the discussion, after we resolved those 5 points, that I did ask for officers to write to the MMF and the William and Edith Charitable Trust, just thanking them for the work that they've done over this short period of time. But if that was missed, I just wondered if it could be picked up, please. It's just a matter of courtesy, really, I think.
Over to you, John. I know there has been further correspondence, but did it in fact say that?
Yeah, well, the Oldham Trust have been written to. There does seem to have been some confusion with the post, and it didn't get to them, so the Museum Director Victoria has followed that up with a phone call and will be re-sending the letter.
And on that subject, there has been further other correspondence, hasn't there, John, with the Maidstone Museum Foundation as well, friends? Yeah. I have a copy of that I'll copy to you at some point in time, Simon. The minutes are therefore agreed. Yeah. There are no petitions per item 9. There are no submitted questions by members of the public. There are no questions from members to the chair. So let's go over to the work programme on page 5. Now, just from a chair's point of view, is there any possibility, John, that we could bring the TBC, Economic Development Programme Council's roles into January? Is there any chance of that, do you think?
So I think, Chair, that we discussed that that was likely to be either a briefing paper, as well, it says briefing paper, so we can certainly circulate that in January, if that's okay.
That would be okay, because on the basis of the fact that I don't want to seem, it's fortunate that we actually have the Leader of Council here with us tonight as a substitute. But on the basis of the fact that my MP happens to be the Levelling Up Minister within the Treasury Department, I have had a number of conversations with her in the last few days. And in fact, we went to church together on Sunday. And she suggested that we could make a contribution. And as somebody who's been in economic development for some years, you'll know about things like not only European Social Programme and European Regional Development Fund, but things like LEADER and the other funding that we had, City Challenge, Task Force, all these issues that we've had over many, many years to reinvigorate a localised economy. And she suggested that we might like to put pen to paper and come up with a few suggestions for her. So I'm proposing to have that conversation with her formally fairly soon, but if we could put together a Maidstone Borough Council representation, that would be useful, for which would combine very usefully with that piece of the agenda. That's just a note. And Gordon, you were next.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really to John Foster, this one. Decommissioning public art policy. What is that all about?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Newton. So we have, over the years, commissioned quite a lot of public art, particularly around Maidstone Town Centre, but elsewhere as well. And some of it is starting to get quite old. And when I looked at some of these pieces of public art, we thought, well, okay, do we still want it there? Is it still adding to the street scene? Is it still helping to create place? We didn't have any criteria in which to say, okay, well, maybe it's time to say that one goodbye and maybe something else could come in its place. And obviously some of it may well have local appeal. Local people might have some connection with it. So just taking it away didn't seem like a very good idea. But we didn't have a policy that actually said how we would go about decommissioning a piece of art. Who might need to be consulted? Can we just do it? And you know, fine. So I thought it'd be helpful if our arts officer, Anne-Marie, looked at other examples of decommissioning policies, decommissioning public art policies, and come up with something that this committee might want to have a look at.
Councillor Harper, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. It'd be useful perhaps in addition to the firming up on the economic development programme, I just wanted some dates around all these to be confirmed, because it's almost approaching along a list as actually what we've actually got confirmed. And some of them, you know, dovetail quite nicely together. So we're going to be reviewing the museum opening hours. We talked a lot about the museum last time and tonight. And then we've got the museum 20-year plan, which I think from memory we said we were going to look at early in the new year. But I just thought it'd be useful to have a few dates by those so that John and Victoria and other officers know when they're working to produce reports, because obviously they've got a lot of day work to do as well. But one which I know has been hanging around a long time is the pump track development. And I remember, I think it was Brian Clark brought that to this committee probably over a year ago now. And I know at that time we said we'd look into it more in conjunction with making Maidstone more active. And I'm just thinking, we've obviously got this big report tonight, the SOPG report, whether it might be perhaps sensible to look at the pump track concept early in the new year, really. I have no idea what, you know, but a timetable for it would be useful, I think. Thank you.
John, do you want to comment on that, on the basis that we've also got Mike somewhere on the sideline somewhere here?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, in terms of the review of the revised museum opening hours and working arrangements, we did have a review at 6 months. The rationale for this one is to review it at the end of the first year. So April, I think, would make sense for that one. The decommissioning of the public art policy, I have received the draft already from Anne-Marie. I just need to review it. So I would have thought February would be a good time for that one to come to committee. The governance arrangements, that's a little bit reliant upon the timing of the external legal advice that we're going to get on that one, which is why it still needs to be confirmed, I'm afraid. The pump track development, that's captured in the work of the SOPG. It's really a question of how much time and emphasis we put on that element of a much wider strategic piece of work that's going on at the moment in time, bearing in mind you know, the focus of this committee and I think we discussed previously, Chair, the sort of strategic objectives we're trying to accomplish with this committee this year.
Can I just add further to that? The leader and I were also due to have a meeting today in response to further governance arrangements within the museum, but unfortunately, for obvious reasons and COVID, that has had to be put back for the time being. But we are still trying to. John's doing the legal side of the governance arrangements, and certainly Councillor Burton and I are trying to take some practical initiatives forward. But unfortunately, like so many things, it's suffering the COVID delay. Another point, Paul, go on.
That's fine. I think it's just really, it's just so that we have an idea of, of the timings. And I can understand the pump track development when we're looking at the leisure centre, which is tens of millions of pounds or whatever we do. Pump track development's clearly a much more a minor thing, which, needs to be a secondary thing after that. So that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
And there is one other thing on that agenda, and of course that's town centre strategy that we may not really have mentioned, but I mean, anticipate regular updates in that respect, although one's just put down there. I think that Phil's certainly intended to have a meeting with Simon and I very soon on maintaining very regular updates, because things can happen either in some cases very slowly, but in some cases may come in all of a sudden. And certain decisions are also being made at SPI level on that front, and they also will be at PNR level as well. So we'll get regular updates, I'm sure. Is that all on the work progress, Simon?
Yes, thank you. I do want to just advise the committee that earlier in the month, or towards the end of November, we had a very good meeting at the museum with all the staff, Chair and I, and John, and certainly I certainly had a greater understanding of the new gallery and what was likely to happen. In line with the report coming in on the 18th of January, that isn't very far away. And I'm wondering, in terms of the timeline for the gallery, given that we don't quite know what we're doing with the gallery, because in my mind we haven't had the opportunity to zip down to Brighton yet, and given the COVID regulations, we might not be able to, and therefore I do wonder, and this will probably go down like a lead balloon, but I just wonder whether we might put that into the February committee, because what I wouldn't want to happen is that a report is written which really isn't very meaningful, because we haven't got the full information, and therefore it's then deferred. So I'd rather take some affirmative action and defer it prior to that happening in January, but I'll be guided by officers and colleagues on the committee.
If you want my opinion, Simon, you made a very logical point. And in that respect, if we look at this particular work programme, and on the basis of COVID's getting in the way of everything at the moment, again, and it is December, and we're meeting mid-January, it could well be that we'll have on this basis no business at all in January. So it might as well be possible to defer everything and anything into February. Would Democratic Services have an opinion on this?
As to whether we can defer into February or...
Basically, I'm saying there's a potentiality that there will be no business in January, so therefore there will be no committee.
Yep, that's, you can, via the proper officer, you can choose to, if there's one item or very few items on the agenda, you can just cancel that meeting and go, put it on the February agenda.
Again, I'll ask John if yes, I realise that there's that, but I suspect that would the museum need more time to firm up on things?
I would say Councillor Webb has raised a very good point in the sense that there is a greater degree of uncertainty now in certainly being able to visit Brighton and have face-to-face meetings with the staff. That is certainly going to be probably challenging in January. There are obviously certain stages that a gallery designer will have to go through, but it's absolutely true now that some of those timelines are going to probably change and be elongated. So I haven't got an issue with it coming to February.
Councillor Burton.
Just a quick point. If you're looking at not holding the meeting in January, the one that worries me there is finance strategy and budget proposals. That is on a timeline if this committee wants to make a contribution to P&R for the consideration of budget proposals to full council. That possibly is time critical.
I accept the fact that, I mean, John Foster has pointed out the fact that budget proposals and the medium-term financial strategy are important for that particular committee, for that January committee. We could, of course, hold it just for one particular agenda item, but I think we need to suck and see at the moment, quite frankly. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with what Simon said. There's no point, bringing this report on the museum in January if we don't have the information, because Victoria will give us half a report which won't take us anywhere, whereas if we wait another month and she's got all the information, it's going to be much more meaningful. And actually January, if you look at it, we're also discussing the Carriage Museum and the museum, potentially museum 5-year plan. So in February, it will have better context in terms of more items to be discussed on the museum. And January, we just need a short meeting to discuss the budget. Obviously we do need to meet on the budget, but it doesn't need to take that long, does it?
Right, well, we could have a one-item agenda on January. We could defer. We could have Councillor Nagy. It might very well be that. You never, don't predict anything at the moment. That's the secret. Carry on, Councillor Nagy.
Yeah. Recovery and Renewal 4-month review of Community and Skills Hub, TBC by P&R. I've got nothing in my mind. I can't get a picture to that.
Nothing unusual there.
Yeah, usually a picture does come, but not on this one.
Yes, so if you remember, this was the Recovery Renewal was a variety of different projects that was being funded in part by the one-off 860,000 that we had, and we discussed a number of different projects. This particular one was a skills and community hub that was being led by Mid-Kent College, who were interested in a sort of a pilot to bring some of their services into the town centre to try and encourage youngsters and other people who perhaps would find going to Oakwood either challenging or intimidating, and find a very sort of informal way of being introduced to the training opportunities and employment opportunities. So they are in the process of doing that now. They hope to be open with a unit in January. So 4 months on from January should take us to April.
Yeah, I can remember that now. Didn't we give them 60 grand or something? So there's a bit of money still left over then.
So when you say, no, I mean, we've given them £60,000 for the year. This was like a 4-month, they've kicked off. How are they doing? Sort of report back, review. But they will run the service over the entire year.
Okay, thank you. My second one was, I can't see the footpath of the river on here. You know that one we spent all that time?
Excuse me, Councillor Nagy, have you seen today's agenda?
Yeah, but in the work, it's on tonight's agenda. Oh, well, there we go then. I'm speaking too soon.
Right. Okay. Is that all on the work programme then, discussed? Okay. So therefore, We agree the work programme, it is all noted. Thank you very much indeed. Now, what follows is a report from an outside body, which we have none. Unless you're going to tell me otherwise. All right. So one of the highlights, hopefully, of the evening will now be our presentation, or one of several presentations. Are we all live and ready to go? Yeah. I'm going to introduce now Rachel Street and Anne-Marie Kelly, who are going to give a presentation virtually on the impact, the economic impact of Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade.
Thank you, Councillor Al. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can, thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rachel Street. I'm the Chief Exec at Heart of Kent Hospice, and I have my colleague with me, Anne-Marie. Are you there, Anne-Marie?
Yes, I'm here. I don't know if everybody can see me, but I am here, yes.
So Anne-Marie's our Director of Income Generation. We're delighted, I say, to be here. I'm sorry that we can't be there in person, but we're delighted to be with you virtually. And thank you for inviting us to share with you our findings on the economic impact of Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade. So, as you know, I'm relying on Anne-Marie to flip my slides. Can you do the next slide, Anne-Marie, please? Thank you. So Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade took place over 9 weeks, from the 19th of June to the 21st of August. And we had the farewell weekend at Loch Meadow on the 3rd to the 5th of September. And of course, it culminated with a really wonderful evening when all 51 of our large Elmers were sold at auction on the 9th of September. But that, in reality, to get to that stage was actually quite a long time in the making. And we just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for the tremendous support that Maidstone Borough Council gave us in making Elmer such a significant success. But before we delve into that data and the findings, I just want to give you a reminder of why Heart of Kent Hospice created this project. So Heart of Kent Hospice, as you may well know, is based in Aylesford. We were established in 1991, so we're currently celebrating our 30th anniversary. We're an adult hospice supporting people with terminal illnesses and their families, helping them to live well as long as possible and to die in comfort with dignity and respect. We've got a 10-bedded inpatient unit at the hospice in Aylesford where people come for symptom control, pain management and for end-of-life care. But much bigger than that is that we currently have over 900 patients on our caseload, and the majority of that support that we provide and the specialist advice that we give is actually done in the community. It's done in people's homes and in care homes. And here we can help patients avoid unnecessary hospital admissions and support them to alleviate their discomfort and distress. And we're really proud that throughout the pandemic and now as the pandemic peaks again, we could continue to deliver the services both in the hospice and in the community. And I recognise that some of you here this evening may have a personal connection to the hospice and already be existing supporters. So you will know that we're an independent charity. And in order to meet the needs of the terminally ill people in the community and across Maidstone, we need to raise 80% of our income each year, which is effectively £4 in every £5 that we spend on average over the last few years. And this is increasing around £4 million a year we need to raise. And as you would expect, and as you can see from this graph, the demand for our care and our services has been growing significantly. Even before the pandemic, we were increasing the number of patients that we saw. Last year, we cared for 1,769 patients, and only last month, we saw one of the highest numbers of referrals that we've seen for a while. But we also know that there are many more people out there that need our help and support. And this is where Elmer and his friends came in. We set about on Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade to increase awareness of the hospice and to let the community know that we are here for them when they need us. And I think we first brought the idea to Maidstone Borough Council back in 2018. And we chose to use a sculpture trail because it's a tried and tested model. These trails are supported with evidence and statistics that demonstrate their success, not only in terms of raising the profile of charities, but also in terms of destination marketing, showcasing areas to boost their local economy by installing a high-quality temporary tourist attraction. And our original idea was to put 40 uniquely designed fiberglass sculptures based on the children's character Elmer the Patchwork Elephant around Maidstone. We actually ended up with 51 large Elmers and 31 small Elmers. And to do this, we worked in partnership. Next slide, Anne-Marie. We worked in partnership with Wild in Art. We knew that we couldn't do this alone. It was too big a project for us to do alone. So working with Wild in Art, who had extensive experience delivering these trails, both nationally and internationally, we took the project forward. Now, I'm hoping that the wonders of modern technology will work, because before I hand over to Anne-Marie, we would quite like to share with you just a little video, just a little reminder about what Elmer was all about. And what it looked like to have Elmer and his friends on the streets of Maidstone. We're not sure if the sound's going to work, but hopefully the pictures, it's only a short video, the pictures will give you a glimpse back to what summer was like in Maidstone.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody. I'm hoping that you can see me or see me shortly. It's a really lovely reminder to see that little video of Elmer's Maidstone, this sculpture that was in Jubilee Square and sponsored by Maidstone Borough Council. Laura has very kindly said that for the videos that we shared tonight, she will circulate them. So if you weren't able to hear the music, then hopefully that will bring it alive when you see it and it's circulated. So the focus for this evening is for us to explain the economic impact of Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade. We worked with three different evaluation partners in order to provide the evidence back to Maidstone Borough Council and to all the other partners and sponsors who supported us on the parade. We worked with NGI Solutions. They work with Wild in Art on all of their parades, so it gives us some comparable data. We also work with Zing Insights to share the experience of, or to learn about the experience of our corporate partners, and Pennington PR, who were a specialist destination marketing agency who helped us during the parade to make sure that we could do the most we could to take advantage of this opportunity. Now, Rachel has already touched on some of the hospice's aims. There are many people on the call tonight who know a lot about Elmer. You know, John Foster, Victoria Barlow, Councillor David Nagy. You've all been with us on this journey, so I'm very aware that you have seen these before. It was a really important and transformational opportunity for the hospice. But we also came to you with some really specific aims for Maidstone. We promised you that we would showcase Maidstone's historical assets, bring the business community together, boost the local economy, attract people to the streets of Maidstone, and instil civic pride. And when I think back now to the conversations that we were having with local businesses back in 2018, I remember such an eagerness from local businesses to want to invest in Maidstone and to want to put something on the streets that was really high quality, really fun, that would bring people to Maidstone. And I'm really proud that when we went live with the parade, we had an enviable group of partners, including Maidstone Borough Council, who were backing us, and also a tremendous group of sponsors who sponsored each of the individual sculptures. When we look now and we compare these sponsors to the other trails, I think one of the things that really stands out is that there are so many Maidstone born and bred local businesses that are investing back in the local community. So here are some of the Elmer highlights. We had 50 on the streets of Maidstone, and then Rachel also mentioned the extra roaming Elmer that we had out, and he did guest appearances across the county town. 31 local schools and community groups took part in our learning programme. We were absolutely thrilled that we were able to have learning herds in the museum, in the library, and in the local shopping centres. The statistics say that we have an estimated 230,979 visitors who came to Maidstone during those 9 weeks to participate in the parade. You might remember we had an app that people could download on their telephones. I think it was quite a common sight over the summer to see people just walking around looking into their phones as they were unlocking the various sculptures. We made a decision as a hospice to make that app free in order to make the trail as accessible as possible to everybody, and consequently we were absolutely thrilled to have over 10,000 people download it. Nearly 400,000 people unlocked the sculptures on the trail. That means they visited each individual sculpture and put in the little number that was on each of the plinths. And nearly 6,500 people took photographs of the sculptures and being around Maidstone and uploaded them to the community gallery. And finally, I think the most staggering statistic is that over 19,000 miles were walked, and was calculated by the app pedometer. And one of the things that we talked about with many people around Maidstone in the lead up to the parade was the opportunity to get people out and active and to show the beautiful spaces that we have. And I think the app is evidence that we were able to achieve that. So I'm going to delve a little bit further now into some of the economic impact of the parade, and this is data provided by NGI Solutions. The survey was sent to all of the people that downloaded the app and also the people that the hospice had on our own database because they had registered with us separately for having an interest in Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade. Over 1,300 people responded to the survey, and according to NGI Solutions, this was a significantly higher than average response rate, which gave us a really robust source of information and evidence. And in particular, the survey were looking at 3 different things: the demographics of the people that participated in the trail, the economic activity whilst they were taking part in the trail, and awareness of the hospice. So this is a breakdown of who participated and, interestingly, the income brackets that they fell into. So we were thrilled that actually the majority of people that took part in the parade were between 36 to 45 years old. These are people that the hospice has been wanting to reach. And also we were interested to see that over 20% of people declared themselves as having an income of over £61,000. Now, I think that's an interesting question for the hospice, but also for Maidstone. It's not the type of information that we had before. And I think one of the opportunities for all of us is to ensure that we are providing activities that will interest people who have that earning capacity. We looked at where people travelled from in order to come to the parade, and as we would have expected, the vast majority of people were from Maidstone and Kent. This is something that we had discussed with NGI Solutions in advance of the parade going live, because we must remember that this parade was put on during the backdrop of the pandemic. We had originally intended to go ahead with the parade in 2020 and we had to pause it. And subsequently, we were very fortunate that we had it ready to go as lockdown restrictions were lifted in the summer. We wanted to provide an opportunity to a reason for people to come into Maidstone, and the evidence shows that people came into Maidstone and explored all the different areas that we had placed the sculptures in. So we looked at the geography of Maidstone. We worked with John Foster and many members of your team, John. Laura in particular was absolutely amazing in helping us to showcase what Maidstone has to offer. So we decided to organise the route around 3 different areas: the heritage trail that would show off the town centre, the nature trail to show off our parks, Moat Park, Watman Park, and also the river trail to take people down by the river. And this slide shows that the vast majority of people completed all of the trail and saw all 80 odd of the sculptures, including the learning herds. And the economic model of Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade was based on people returning to Maidstone again and again to see the sculptures. And it was possible to do the entire trail in one day, but it would have been a really long and tiring day. And what this slide shows is that actually most people returned to the trail over a period of 6 days, which I think is really great evidence of the ability that the trail had to bring people on a regular basis back into Maidstone. The average dwell time was just over 4 hours, and we understand from NGI Solutions that, again, that is really significant for a trail where they consider an average dwell time in a town centre to be about 2 hours. We wanted Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade to be an activity for everyone. Yes, the character is most well known as a children's character, but actually I think what this shows is that people of all ages and with all types of groups enjoyed the parade. And 56% of people said it was their main reason for coming into Maidstone during the summer. I'm hoping that some of you will have been in Maidstone on that opening weekend and on the other really significant weekends like the farewell weekend at Loch Meadow. There was a real buzz around the town and a real energy, and we were really proud to be the people that took this to Maidstone. I hope that you will all be pleased that with your contribution we have encouraged people to come into town and to spend more time in the town centre. One of the things that we were really aware of is that the trail had the potential to highlight areas of interest in a town centre to people that live locally, but maybe they haven't explored their location as tourists previously. And I think this slide shows that this is what we did. We've seen already that the vast majority of people were local. But if you are familiar with a word cloud, as you can see on the screen now, the more time that people say something, the bigger it appears on the word cloud. And I think it is loud and proud on this word cloud that Maidstone Museum, Vinters Nature Reserve, the library and Watman Park were the areas that people discovered as part of the trail and really enjoyed. The information from NGI Solutions gives us a wealth of information, and we will be feeding back to Laura, John and the team more of this information. But to give you an example, we have the breakdown of the non-local day visitor spend and the local day visitor spend, and that has enabled NGI Solutions to assess what the economic impact overall of Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade has been. And these are some quite staggering figures. So they've used a model called the STRIP model, and this is something that you may well be aware of with your area of interest. It's a well-known model which is used by other key events like the London Marathon. And using that model and that methodology, they have estimated visitors as being 230,979. and you will see on the screen some enormous figures in terms of the value of the direct economic impact of the parade, the total event impact, and really importantly, the gross value added. So this is what NGI Solutions, using the SUSTRIP model, assess the impact that remains in the local economy to be. I have another short little video without the sound. I'm wondering if I should send it on to you to view at your own pace. The video is of the installation weekend at Loch Meadow Market. It's an example of an activity that was very concentrated over a specific period of time, a Friday, Saturday and Sunday. We were delighted to have the support of Alexa and her team over at Loch Meadow to allow us to make use of the market that weekend. Over 4,000 people came to see all of the sculptures that weekend. It was absolutely extraordinary, and Councillor David Burton was there on the opening to see all of the sculptures under one roof. It was extraordinary, but I hope you will also recognise that by having 4,000 people coming to see the sculptures one weekend, that was 4,000 people also coming into Maidstone and contributing to the local economy. Now, I'm going to hand back to Rachel in a moment, but before I do, I just want to touch on civic pride. I spent a long time going around and learning from other trails how to make this as good as it possibly could be for Maidstone. And one of the things that I was told repeatedly was the impact of the trail on boosting civic pride was extraordinary and something that many trails had not anticipated. So instilling civic pride is that sense of being proud of your local area and wanting to show it off. And the evidence from NGI Solutions says that 2/3 of the visitors came into Maidstone to visit the trail, and 56% said it was their main motivation. 82% of people said that they thought the trail was excellent, and 98% of people were proud to have the trail in their area. I'm going to hand back now to Rachel to finish off, but I would also just like to reiterate what Rachel has said. Whilst I am incredibly proud of everything the Hospice has achieved, we could not have done this without the tremendous support of Maidstone Borough Council and the various teams and contributors. So thank you. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie's just left up there a couple of pictures, quotes from the trail that we got as part of the evaluation. And I'm conscious that time's ticking and we could talk about Elmer for hours, but we do want to leave you with some time for questions. So I just want to touch briefly on some of the PR that we attracted during the trail. So as Anne-Marie mentioned earlier, we worked with our specialist destination marketing consultant to support us in PR with Pennington PR, because we recognised that this was a unique opportunity and we wanted to give it everything. And throughout the trail, we were featured and interviewed on all local media, and we even made it into the national press. Some of the highlights include the BBC Radio Kent's drive time interviews. We had support from the Downs Mail, and of course from our official media partner for Elmer, the KM Media Group. One of the articles that we're most proud of is the interview that they did with Ralph Steadman, which was published across all of their titles. And the feedback that we have is that has a reach of over 26,000 readers. And we estimate that the value of that media exposure to be in the region of £200,000. So to conclude, our aim this evening has been to share with you the evidence that we have on the economic impact of Elmer. I hope that you found it interesting and relevant, and that we've shown how Elmer's Big Heart of Kent Parade had a hugely positive impact on Maidstone's economy this summer. You may also recall that on the night of the auction, we raised an incredible £312,750 when all the elephants were auctioned. And that's a really significant sum of money for the Hospice, because it enables us to continue meeting the needs of our local community. And to put this into context, in real terms, that sum of money would enable us to provide the nursing care for 4 months on our inpatient unit, which would support, on average, 64 people who are admitted for pain relief, symptom control or end-of-life care. We've got one final video here, which Anne-Marie, I hope you agree will work without the sound. This is a letter that I received recently from a gentleman who's an inpatient with us on Ron, and it was a letter that he sent to us after he'd been with us for a short time, where we were supporting him with pain relief and symptom control. I think that's just a really lovely reminder of the work of the hospice. Heart of Kent Hospice is Maidstone's hospice, and we can't provide the care and support that we do to the people of Maidstone without your support. So thank you. We're happy to take any questions.
Thanking you very much indeed for an absolutely wonderful report with some absolutely wonderful figures. I'm going to ask the members here if they have any questions. And do I see any hands raised? Yeah, Councillor Harper and then Councillor Webb to follow.
I was just going to say I was overawed by the response from the community and the number of people who took part in your trial. It's quite amazing that when we were thinking of this back in sort of 2018, 2019, the idea of the pride this has generated, where it says 98% of people had were proud to have this take part in Maidstone, and people discovered places, because I myself went on it over a couple of days, and I'd never been to Vintners Park before, so when they said you discover new areas, I discovered the Vintners Park Nature Trail, which I'd heard of but never been there, and you suddenly realise on your own backyard just what you can find through this sort of thing. So I'd like to say thank you to the Heart of Kent Hospice, and I think that last letter summed it up, didn't it? That was why we were doing it. That's why we took part in the partnership, to help the hospice. And I think it's achieved more than I think we'd hoped it to. David would have been when we had leaders groups and we were discussing this. It's far surpassed our expectations. So when are we going to do the next one? I suppose that's my question.
That's certainly a valid point. Perhaps I could sort of rephrase that question in some shape or form, and perhaps those at the Heart of Kent Hospice could actually tell us what we could do to repeat this and how we would need to do it. Have you got any advice for us before I ask Councillor Webb for his question?
It's certainly a question we get asked a lot. Anne-Marie, I don't know if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for your kind words. I think they were shared. People were really generous in their compliments of the trail. So thank you. It is true to say that many organisations that do one of these trails go on to do another one. Rachel is quite right. We get asked this question a lot. You are the first people to hear this, the outcome of the evaluation. We now need to share it with others because, of course, we can only even begin to consider doing something like this again if we were able to get the support to do it again. The support to put it on, but also, of course, is there an appetite for another 50 people to buy sculptures at an auction at the end of it again? So we will carefully consider it. We will definitely be back to talk to you if it is something that we feel there is an appetite for local businesses to support again. It takes about 2.5 years without a pandemic to put this type of thing on with the level of engagement and success that we did it with this year. And I think we would all want to aim for that again. So we'll keep you posted, I think is the bottom line.
I think the one thing we really learn is that you can help us and we can help you, and thanking you very much indeed. Councillor Webb.
Quite outstanding, I think, both of you and the team that you have at the Heart of Kent Hospice. I know from personal circumstances, in 2016, when one of my own family passed away with you, what you provide for them is absolutely first class. And, you know, you too, and your team, but particularly you two, should take an enormous amount of credit and, you know, breathe in, heart-pumping moment, because if you hadn't have been there, this wouldn't have happened. And okay, Maidstone Borough Council certainly supported you, but actually it was you two that put this together, and I do want to add my hearty congratulations to you and your team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb.
Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I actually launched this in 2019 when I was the mayor, and I've actually seen this. I first saw this going on in Liverpool many years ago when I visited, and they had lambs, baby things. So as you travelled in, you saw these statues of lambs, and it just generates the talk. And what I liked about this was actually Maidstone Borough Council being involved fully and not just a bit. And it proves that if the council gets involved, in my opinion, most things are successful, because most things need the backing of the council for things to carry on. And to see it was such a great success. And my mum actually used the services in 2020, so, and she actually raised money over the years for the hospice as well. Whenever I do an event, I always try and raise money for the hospice. So I think there's the goodwill in Maidstone for the Heart of Kent Hospice, and always will be, especially with myself. So hopefully we can do something. And this is sort of sets the standard. If everyone gets involved, and you've got the attraction, which the elephants were, which were fantastic, because obviously we've got a connection to elephants, you will generate this sort of thing, and everyone will benefit. But it does need the backing of an event like this of everyone. And when I see all the sponsors on the list there, I think we did nearly have everyone, and the people of Maidstone, and it came together and was a great success. So I must congratulate everyone. I haven't met the new executive yet, but I hope to soon. But it was a fantastic turnout. It was the talk of the town, the talk of last summer, actually, when we didn't have much to talk about. So in my opinion, it was fantastic. And hopefully we might be able to try and do something like this again in some way. Thank you.
Councillor Burton.
I'd speak briefly because enough's been said already, but I have to confess I started off as an Elmer cynic. I wasn't convinced I could. I ended up a complete Elmer convert, I have to say. I spent quite a lot of time, you know, as we come into meetings, just watching outside this town hall, family after family rocking up to be photographed with Maidstone Elmer that sat out there. And I got thoroughly caught up in the whole process by the end. So tremendous job. Thank you for everything you did. I love the idea of another one, and can't help but think it should be a dinosaur Iggy one.
Thank you, Councillor Burton.
I think there you have it. ladies. And can I ask that you take back to your whole team Maidstone Borough Council's thanks for an absolutely wonderful project. I'm glad you enjoyed it, I'm glad you got benefits out of it, and I'm glad that it was done in a partnership where we as Maidstone Borough Council were a part of it too. It's a great partnership and we look forward to something like this again. So not only do I ask committee to note this report, I ask committee to endorse a round of thanks for you and all your work, and long may you continue, and well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I now move back to official business of committee. Councillor Forecast, you're probably used to this by now, in that in arriving somewhat late. No problem, we're glad to see you. We appreciate what it's like with trains coming from London. Can you just give us a report as to whether you have got any disclosures and whether in fact you have been lobbied or not?
No, nothing to report.
None of each. Okay, thank you very much. We then go over now to, we're virtually, hopefully ready, for item 15, the second quarter financial update and performance monitoring report, for which Ellie should be there.
Yep, good evening. Thank you, Chairman, and hello, everyone. So this is the second quarter finance and performance monitoring report, which covers a period from April to September. So just looking at the finance information first, which is shown at Appendix 1 to the report. At the moment, we're forecasting this committee will end the year with an overspend of around 0.1 million, and that overspend arises from some anticipated income shortfalls at the leisure centre, the business terrace and the market. So the wider position, forecast position for the council as a whole at the end of quarter two was an underspend of 265,000. Looking at the capital programme, we are predicting slippage for the year of around 1.5 million, and that mainly relates to the Moat Park Visitor Centre project. That project is well underway and we expect it will complete in 2022. So other schemes have progressed and we're currently forecasting total expenditure of around 2.9 million for the year. So I will hand over to Carly at this point, who will talk you through the performance monitoring appendix, but be very happy to take any questions after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie, and good evening, members. So the quarter two performance report can be found on pages 22 to 24 of your reports pack tonight. And as seen with quarter one, neither of the two targeted indicators have hit their target in quarter two. So firstly, the footfall in the town centre indicator missed its target, this time by more than 10%. Although when comparing to quarter two last year, it did see an improvement of 11.5% in numbers. The economic development team obviously note that there is no hard evidence to suggest why people visit the town centre, but as activities such as dining, shopping and leisure etc. increase, so they hope will the footfall. The second indicator missing its target is tracking the number of unemployed youths, so 18 to 24-year-olds, and as a reminder, this target has been determined using the average monthly unemployed youths from a pre-pandemic year. So the numbers have, however, continued to fall, although we've not reached pre-pandemic figures yet. September itself saw a 28% decrease in unemployed youths compared to the same month the year before. Now, more positive news can also be seen the percentage of unemployed people in the borough. It ended the quarter on 4.2%, comparing this to September last year when we were at a figure of 5.3%. And also the average house prices in Maidstone has continued to increase when we're comparing to the same period for the year before. So now, alongside Ellie, I am happy to answer any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, Questions? Councillor Harper.
Yeah, the only question in terms of the financial bit is on the variances on page 19. I was just wondering in terms of the business terrace as to whether what the team's doing to try to, encourage more people to move in. Obviously, in the middle of the pandemic and so on, it's not a good time for it. But how, the £58,000 year-end forecast. I mean, what do you feel? Is it, are we still doing fairly well given the situation, or, because just the bald figure when you see something, not achieving budget, it might not be as bad as it looks. So just a bit of context would be useful.
That's probably a question for John Foster.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Yes, so during the pandemic, we had a number of voids in the business terrace. Certainly people were asked to work from home. Businesses found it very, very difficult. But since then, it has picked up. And I can now report that we only have one vacant office, a 4-person office, and the rest of the terrace, all 23 offices, is now full. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's very good news. That the business terrace is sort of back to its historic level of being pretty well full. The other question I had was about the number of properties on page 24. This is property sold, rather, in Maidstone. The figures obviously showed a dip in this May. Presumably, is that the impact of the stamp duty finishing? I don't know if we've got any more information around that in terms of the local property market.
Just to add some information to that, we did ourselves in the analytics department take a look at that drop as well. There's no information given to us by where we get the information from the house price index. We can only assume, obviously, with the stamp duty that should have ended in March and then got delayed again until June. So we're making those assumptions here as well. I don't know whether John has anything further to add.
No, John has nothing further to add. Councillor Burton.
Just want to pick up, if I may, on the question Councillor Harper put there about the business terrace, and that's brilliant news that we've got lots of occupancy again. You might not know this, so if not, don't worry, but the profile of the people coming in, are they people that used to be there returning? Are they people that have perhaps downsized from larger office accommodation elsewhere? Or are they new starting? I'm just sort of curious where they're coming from, if you have a feel for that, but if you don't have that information here, perhaps for another day.
I haven't got a complete picture for you. I do know that we have somebody was in a hot desk who now wants an office. Other than that, I don't believe there are any other returners. They are largely new businesses or existing businesses who want the small space. Not businesses that are downsizing on the whole, but I can give you chapter and verse for all 22 occupants in a briefing paper if that's okay. Yep.
Perhaps that's something that we can come up when we go through the economic development partners and players, and a bit of information on that would go down pretty usefully, I think. I have a further question. When we look at some things as the unemployed people seeking out work benefits and those that use unemployment, whilst we know that the unemployed figures have gone down and in both those two categories, do we know whether there's more or less people actually seeking work?
I don't have that information to hand, but it's certainly something we can probably get hold of from the DWP data that they provide us with, and I can circulate that around when we've had a look at it.
I would find it particularly useful. I know I'm a bit of a boring fiend when it comes to facts and figures, but if we do know that the labour force has either increased one way or another, whether it's more people seeking or less people seeking, it would give us another sort of barometer figure. And I would deeply appreciate that. Any more questions? Councillor Cannon.
Yeah, just on the unemployment, it's obviously really sort of, it's sad to see that youth unemployment is still high as a result of the pandemic. Do we know what sectors are sort of helping to reduce that? Is it hospitality opening up? Young people are starting to be employed. Do we know what sector is really helping to reduce young youth unemployment in the town?
I certainly don't have any of that insight. I don't know whether, John, you could answer that question.
Haven't got that detail in terms of where young people are getting employment. Obviously, there was the Kickstart program, which was a help for a number of them, and we can find some more details about how many Kickstart starters we had in the Maidstone area. And that was providing work experience for those that are on unemployment benefit for a 6-month period to help them get that experience, which is obviously absolutely critical to help them move into the labour market. In terms of sort of the numbers looking and the numbers we've employed, the numbers of economically active people has risen to one of the highest levels I've seen for quite some time, which is really good. And that's sort of increased from what was it, in sort of 92,000 in April 2019 to up to 93,000 now, which, well, up to June 2021, which is quite good, and I'd like to see those figures increase. So that's encouraging. And as of now, the unemployment level has gone down to 3.8%, and youth unemployment has come down as well. Not so much, but it has come down. So the trajectory is still looking good for recovery.
Well, if anything, it's looking better. Because there's actually more people that are in those figures, but less with problems. But then having said that, not that this committee can take any thanks for it, but the former chair of SPI sitting over there might be able to, in that there has been an additional amount of housing in the area. So it's nice to know, and obviously they have all been employed. So, I mean, without going through random figures, the trends, come what may, whatever they are looking better. No more questions on that item? Right. We have a recommendation, don't we? You have the recommendations in front of you on the papers. I assume, unless I hear any objections, those recommendations are acceptable, both 1, 2, and 3. Is that agreed? Agreed fully? Yes? Okay, we're all agreed. Thank you very much. Right, next item. Item 16, the medium-term financial strategy. We're making reasonable progress tonight, although we do have 2 further presentations. I have predicted that there may well be a break. At this point, I'm assuming that we'll probably have it after presentation agenda item 18, where there will be coffee. Anyway, so now I go on to medium-term financial strategy, pages 25 to 86. And again, I go back to Ellie to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report sets out the draft medium-term financial strategy for the 5-year period from 22-23, and it gives the committee an opportunity to consider and comment on the proposed strategy. So I'll just go through some of the main headlines of the report. Firstly, the strategic plan is still considered to be relevant, although within this there are some emerging priorities, including the town centre strategy and proposals for additional affordable homes. We're also exploring the use of new homes bonus to support revenue spending in certain areas, which is a slight change of direction for us in that area. So our key assumptions at the moment include a council tax increase of 2%, general inflation assumption of 2% in line with the Bank of England's target, but with some specific higher inflation assumptions for individual items such as energy costs and index-linked contracts. We're also in the process of reviewing these assumptions. So the strategic revenue projection for 22-23 also allows an additional 500,000 to cover short-term pressures caused by high inflation. So our current projections are showing a surplus for 22-23, although this is a constantly evolving picture, and we're currently estimating a deficit occurring from 23-24. We're also expecting the provisional local government finance settlement over the next couple of days, so of course we'll be reworking our strategic revenue projections once we see those numbers. And then finally, at Appendix C to the report, we've included the results of the residents' survey, which just provides an overview of what's coming forward in terms of residents' priorities for council spending. So I'll leave it there in terms of my introduction, but again, very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Councillor Webb.
It's not really a question, it's commend the officers on the report. It's one of the few financial statements that I've read and understood in that sense. Very clearly written. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. I think on the basis of that, I'm sure that most of us would agree with that sentiment. Councillor Harper.
I think, yeah, I mean, obviously the report's well laid out. I think one of the things I'm just looking at is on page 66, which is part of the resident survey. And okay, the colours, obviously in black and white, it's not that easy to follow, but I know they say the top 3 areas where respondents answered spend less, and it has 2 of our major areas, heritage and culture and economic development. But actually, when you look at those lines, for instance, on heritage and culture, it says 46% would spend the same and 20% would spend more. So I tend to look at that, bearing in mind, having been chair of this committee and sitting on the committee, is that it's only a third of the population, or just over, who would want to spend less on the provision we do, and that 2/3, roughly, think we're either spending the right amount or we should be spending more. Because I think you can always sort of make it sound worse than it is. And even, again, when you look at economic development, which for a lot of residents is probably slightly esoteric, but even there, it's only 36% said spend less. You know, again, the bulk of people said spend the same or more. So I just think it's useful for us as a committee to bear that in mind, because you can look at this, and clearly those are the spend less are some of the higher ones, but in reality, when you look at it, most people think we're either spending about the right amount, or we might spend a bit more in our service areas. So I always suggest to the committee that you take heart when you look at that, when you look at it through that lens, as opposed to thinking, oh my God, people don't want to spend less on these areas.
In some ways, Councillor Harper, you took some words out of my mouth. I agree with you, because I do think that You know, it's not the easiest thing to get your head round, the words of economic regeneration and economic development. It's not a field many people fully understand, nor how it works. So I do take your point. No disrespect to the public, but it is not easy to understand. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. Little throwaway comment here, because you know one of the areas spend less that's flagged, of course, is planning. But I think we do need to sort of put ourselves into the mind of the people responding, and I suspect there's an element of where if you spend less on it, it'll go away. I think the message is perhaps sort of more subliminal than the direct response. But rightly or wrongly, I wanted to use this item to shoehorn in a reminder about something. I think it's well known that I champion the thought that this council acquires a significant amount of its own housing. But also, we have talked about making a priority out of speculatively building premises for businesses. So, you know, as you move into your recommendations into the medium-term financial strategy and the capital implications of that, I don't often sit on this committee, so I just wanted to remind us all that, you know, it's one thing to build houses for people. People need jobs. Jobs come from businesses, and there's a lot of homeless businesses out there at the moment. You know, there's a chronic shortage, perhaps not around the officey end of things so much at the moment, but, you know, you try and get sort of particularly the smaller or even larger, you know, Class B2 and B8. You know, the small units for businesses to start are like as rare as hen's teeth. And, you know, if you were looking for something of 100,000 square feet, there is 0 available in Maidstone. So, you know, to perhaps engage what proactively this committee can suggest and bring forwards, you know, using its thought processes might be a P&R thing, but it needs to be supported by economic thinking as well. End of pitch. Thank you.
Very valid points, Councillor Burton, because I know how much within my own ward that is becoming quite an issue these days, in that, as you say, we're building houses, but there's so many other things that are needed to go with it. And work in the local environment rather than having to commute miles and miles is something we really should be looking forward to, because we actually want to reduce people's carbon emissions at the same time as employ them. So that's certainly a point we do need to make, and between SPI and ourselves we should be making that point to P&R. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I was just going to completely agree. I think we need to amend the recommendation to actually put that point in, because we're asked for our comments, and I think a comment from this committee should be we would be asking the council to consider capital provision towards, you know, employment and employment premises. I mean, David and I have spoken about this over the last few years as to, you know, the emphasis is often on office-based employment, yet engineering and manufacturing, as well as obviously the agricultural sectors in our economy, are really important in Maidstone, and they tend not to get the profile, perhaps, I say, of office-based employment. And so I'm wondering whether, as we invested in the business terrace, as rightly we did do, we should perhaps be thinking about, as we do this budget and the capital side of it, looking at you know, a pot of money which would enable us to take hold of opportunities to provide small commercial or small industrial commercial type premises in the future, so that we don't end up losing businesses. We'll all remember some of the stories we've had of companies, I mean, from David's area. I mean, Scarabs have stayed in Maidstone. I've forgotten the name of the other people who moved out because they couldn't find anywhere. Yeah. And we want to make sure we don't have anything like that happen again. So I don't know if it's something we can add in as a recommendation on the capital side of this.
if you're making a formal proposal for an additional recommendation based on those lines, then I'll take your proposal, I will second it. But on the basis of that, we don't know any words yet, so I'm therefore going to ask for a small adjournment so that you and I can actually draft some pertinent words and then come back in about 5 or 10 minutes. Anybody wish to say anything on that matter before I ask for agreement to that recommendation? David Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. If someone could explain what our existing policy is, that might be handy. If we've got one even.
What, our existing policy vis-à-vis economic development, jobs and employment?
For exactly like the leader said, you know, for jobs, well, we're working on leisure, but for jobs, what is the council's at the moment plan in the future to encourage jobs? Because we always say about high-paid jobs normally.
Right. I mean,
it always goes in there somewhere.
At this stage, I think I know what the answer is. Please read the economic development strategy. But I'll ask John Foster to comment.
Yes, so if I may, and apologies if I've misunderstood, but we have discussed the idea of intervening in helping to bring forward new employment sites and helping to stimulate the creation of new employment sites by investing in new premises, such as the ones that Councillor Burton was talking about, with regards to new industrial and warehouse space, logistics space. And through consultation, that was included in the economic development strategy as a key action. It got picked up in the recovery and renewal report, and I believe it's also got into a line in the existing capital programme, and perhaps Ellie could confirm whether or not there is a line in the existing capital programme for that type of investment.
So in our current programme, we have 2.5 million a year allocated for property acquisition. It's very high level. It doesn't go into sort of greater detail as to the type of property that we'd be acquiring, but that is currently kind of a recurring annual allowance that we would probably turn to fund this type of initiative in the first instance.
Councillor Webb.
At the risk of bowling a googly, although we might need it in Australia from Thursday, I'm not convinced it's a recommendation that's needed. I think all that certainly the leader has said and Councillor Harper has supported is that this surely should be reflected in the work of SPY and P&R. I'm not sure it's a recommendation because we're already doing it. So therefore, could not a note be appended? Because I'm not sure it's a recommendation because we're doing it. But in terms of that pedantic, I'm not sure myself, but I'm not totally convinced it's a recommendation. It's only a recommendation if it leads to something that's happening that's going to be new. This isn't, because we're doing it elsewhere.
Councillor Harper, how do you feel about that? Because I mean, it is a valid point. We can actually accept this recommendation, but as a result of this committee, I think we all know we're here for jobs and development purposes.
Sorry, I was just about to sneeze. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't really mind how we do it as long as it's flagged up, because I think my concern, and I know David's concern and Martin's in the past, is that unless we're quite clear we want to do this, it will end up just getting lost in the, in the ether when there's so much on, and that's why every time it's come up, I've been making sure it's included in the economic development strategy, and just because most people just always think of office employment, and the other sectors are just as valid. But I don't really mind how we do it, as long as some way we flag it up to policy and resources, and I mean, we've got the leader sitting here, I'm on P&R, Martin's on P&R, so, and I think David, I'm not sure, are you on P&R as well? So there's a number of us on P&R, so I'm sure we can make sure it's reflected. I don't mind how we do it, as long as we note it or whatever.
I'm going to ask Councillor Burton first, but Councillor Lager, did you want to come back still? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. What I was going to suggest, perhaps when we do have these reports and strategy updates, perhaps that could be an item that goes into this report. So we know in the future where it'll be specifically itemed and we'll have an update on where we are in it. Because obviously you just get general things, don't you? But if we had a specific item for that to see where we was, then, I mean, I find out tonight we've got 2.5 million allocated to it because I just happened to ask that question. But if we have something like this, as we're thinking it's very important, we should be pushing it, then that could be an item in the report if members think that's the way to go. Thank you.
I'm fairly sure that John Foster's going to come back on issues around that, but I'm going to ask Councillor Burton to say something now.
Well, all I was really going to say is if you mean it, say it. This report is inviting your comments, your recommendations on the evolution of our financial strategy over the next 5 years moving forwards. So, you know, if this committee recognises this kind of need in our borough for the B2, B8 type classifications or other employment land, say it, put some words to it and make sure it filters through this process and is not forgotten. If you really mean it, there's no harm in saying it twice.
In other words, it could have a recommendation, but on the basis that that is the work, supposedly, as Councillor Webb rightly says, it should be taken as read that we're campaigning for such work. I'll leave it to John Foster to finish off.
The only thing I wanted to say was just to take on Councillor Burton's point about the lack of available industrial and warehouse space in the borough is absolutely right. The bright hope on the horizon is the business park at Junction 8 called Locate Maidstone, LOC8 Maidstone. The groundworks have finally started. We're going to be invited to the opening event shortly, and that's going to be providing a huge amount of logistics and warehouse space, as well as offices in a business park green setting. Is going to be a fantastic addition to the assets that we have for employment in the borough. So it's a great news story.
Would you mind
Councillor
me just
Burton
coming back on that? And that is brilliant news that there finally is progress there. And it's quite an interesting point in case. Big employment allocation, tons of need. Well, why hasn't it already happened? Why isn't it already full? And the point that I'm trying to convey is the speculative build. Okay, you know, there's a lot of businesses, they don't want to go through finding the place, a planning application, you know, how many parking spaces will I be allowed, how many, they just want to, you know, that's what we're looking for. Can we move in 2 months? And what I'm craving is the council, you know, rolls its sleeves up and becomes enabling. That might be that we end up owning some sort of portfolio of rental properties. I personally favour that we actually get in, kickstart it, and do you know what? Sell the properties on to the businesses that want to afford them. And I could bore you to tears why I think that's so important to businesses developing their own balance sheet to grow into the future. We don't need to be tied up in it forever, but we do need to stimulate and not just wait for someone else to do it, because it hasn't been happening. The proof is in the example quoted.
Councillor Harper, do you want to come back?
Well, it's only I've scribbled down some wording. I don't know whether people think, trying to pick up what we've just been saying, and that it's that economic regeneration and leisure requests that consideration is given to continuing capital and revenue provision to support new employment sites, especially new warehouse and industrial sites. I'll put in support again, in support of the economic development strategy, and picking up what David's just said, and consider a programme of kickstart premises, or a programme of speculative kickstart premises, because if we don't put it in as a sort of suggestion, I think as David said, it's not going to be picked up at P&R. They're not necessarily going to be thinking of it when they're looking at the overall budget. So, but if we put it in now, when they consider it in February, this will be a recommendation from this committee, and it will have, therefore, I think, more strength to actually hopefully augment that £2.5 million which is there to do kickstart premises. You need a lot more than that. So can I sort of, does it help if I move that as a recommendation or an amendment to get the thing moving along?
Make a formal proposal, Paul. It's up to you to now make the formal proposal.
Yeah, well, I'll move that then as a formal recommendation. Do you want me to read it out again? Okay.
Please.
I'll go slowly then. So, the Economic Regeneration and Leisure requests that consideration is given to continuing capital and revenue provision to support new employment sites, especially new warehousing and industrial, as outlined in the economic development strategy, and consider a programme of speculative kickstart premises.
Thank you, Paul. I'll happily second that. Any further comments from members?
Yeah, just on the beginning of it, I just think it should be even more consideration, because they are considering it. So I think something like that would say, well, look, let's see if we can go a bit more. It's up to members, though.
You want a bit more emphasis. I think the fact that we're debating it and the fact that we're making a recommendation probably provides enough emphasis at this stage.
If it helps, the sort of wording that might encompass that is that this committee recommends that the capital programme contains sufficient scope to speculatively bring forward employment property such as B2 and B8 classifications in support of the economic development strategy.
In principle, we're nearly there. Councillor Webb, did you want to say something further?
No, I was just supporting what you need to say.
Right. Okay. I mean, in principle, we are there or thereabouts for a second recommendation. So I'm going to just clarify.
And for the sake of good order and easy procedure, if the mover of the motion accepts that amendment and the seconder does, then you know, take it through that way. I don't mind. Yeah.
I just want to confirm with Democratic Services that they've got the bulk of that.
Sorry, it's just the last few words that I didn't catch, but if the committee's happy with it, then I can...
The very last bit was in support of the economic development strategy. Did you have the bit that ended B2 and B8 classifications? Yeah, you've got it all then.
Right. We now have the first recommendation that it considers and comments on the draft. That's exactly what we've just done, that we have considered the comments of the draft's financial strategy at Appendix A. And the second recommendation, I presume we can take them together.
Mr. Chairman, if you just preambled that, you know, the committee notes the report and comments.
Yeah, the committee notes the report.
Wrap it all up in a one-er. Yeah.
And then, I haven't got exact words myself, but can we just... In principle, the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee requests consideration through, can you repeat the words again, Paul?
I think if the preamble just said that the committee notes the report and makes the following recommendation, then you'd wrap that all up in the one thing.
The Democratic Services Officer will read out the full recommendation. That is one recommendation.
So I think this is if I'm following it right, the recommendation that will be put forward. So there will just be one, that the report be noted, and the committee requests that the capital programme contains sufficient scope to speculatively bring forward employment properties such as B2 and B8 classifications in support of the economic development strategy.
That's spot on. Right, we have an official proposal and seconder, do we not? Okay, so members, can we vote on that for or? Right, against? Abstentions? What abstention? Got that. That motion, recommendation is therefore carried. We now move over to agenda item 17. Fees and charges, and it's back to Ellie again.
Thank you, Chairman. Last one from me this evening. So this report sets out the proposed fees and charges to take effect from the 1st of April 2022, and it forms part of the process of setting next year's budget. So budget managers have reviewed the charges as they're required to do at least annually, with reference to the Council's charging policy, which is attached to Appendix 2 to the report. The detailed proposals are shown within Appendix 1, and we've included information about the income budgets there too. Just to note, this is just there for context to assist with tonight's decisions made around charging. We're not asking you to agree budgets as part of this decision. So at this stage, those 22-23 budget estimates should be treated as indicative and subject to change. So the only area for this committee in which changes are actually being proposed to the existing charges is at the museum. However, as has already been mentioned, it was brought to my attention earlier today that some of the information provided in the original Appendix 1 relating to those charges is incorrect. So hopefully you therefore have the updated version of the first page of that appendix, which we're asking the committee to approve this evening. So that's the urgent update that was referred to earlier, and the changes to the original document should be highlighted in yellow. So the committee is asked to agree the charges proposed in Appendix 1 as amended within the urgent update. And again, I'll leave it there, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now open it up to members. Councillor Webb.
Yeah, I'd just be very interested to know, if we look at the museum and the last line, lunch room hire has gone up from £15 to £20. I just would want to know, of the schools that attended, how many don't pay for the visit? So it's a breakdown of how many schools actually pay £20 to eat their lunch, and how many schools pay to go into the museum, because for me, my instinct tells me I'm not happy that we charge schools to eat lunch. If they can't afford to come into the museum, they probably can't afford to pay for the room hire, because we have a reasonable number of schools from deprived wards in Maidstone. And I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not going to vote against it, but I would just like a few more statistics on it, please.
I think it might be appropriate for John Foster to comment.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. I haven't got the exact figure in terms of the numbers of schools that come into the museum for an unguided tour. So that's not with the museum staff. They come in, they bring their pupils with them, and they ask staff to have a room in which they can safely have for themselves a lunch, packed lunch. So the education staff have spoken to the various schools and already spoken to them about how much they are paying now and how much would they be willing to pay, and that's why they've gone up, because the school's feedback to them has said that they would be more than willing to pay that amount to hire it. They discourage general sort of schools walking in because they feel that they can give them so much more if they do the workshops and the guided tours and the craft making and all of those sorts of things. But if schools want to just do that, then that's absolutely fine. But we do have the benefit, actually, of the education team here today to do a presentation, so we could ask more questions of them, and probably will get a much better answer than I could give you.
I thought that was a particularly good answer, actually.
Definitely. Any further questions on this? Councillor Cannon.
Can you just explain what the virtual sessions are? If that's, thanks.
Yeah, so, thank you. So during lockdown, one of the offers of the education team is to take items from the collection and go to schools, and as you can see, they have a number of items, and they provide sort of workshops with the schools, in the schools, and sometimes the schools come in and they provide workshops. Because of COVID, they weren't able to do that, so they went online, and they offered, they sent boxes out to the schools with collection items in, sometimes for self-guided learning, sometimes for the members of the staff virtually would provide learning opportunities. So it was a way of really dealing with COVID, and obviously now you can see that might continue on in some form or another as social distancing might creep in and issues of the Omicron creep in as well. So it was that service that they offered, and it was very much welcomed by the schools.
Can I just add further to that, John? You mentioned schools, but not only did they do schools, they did old people's elderly residential and nursing care homes as well. And that was particularly stimulating in a completely different sense, quite frankly, where older people were anything old in a box stimulates memory. And if it stimulates memory, it stimulates thought and recollection and an active brain, which can be very, very good for people stuck in a residential home when they're completely isolated. So, I mean, I can speak very highly for that service personally. Further questions? Councillor Harper.
It's a bit of a question. It's more probably when Victoria's doing future reports to us. On the collection inquiries at the bottom, where it's the Queen's Own Regimental Museum, I know yourself, Chairman, we've talked about the opportunities presented by that collection in terms of people undertaking research for it and how it potentially we could earn more money from it if it was, presented in a different way. And thinking of that, I suddenly thought also of the Japanese collection and the Brenchley ones, which are both, and especially the Japanese one, a world unique collection, as to whether there's an opportunity for us going ahead to perhaps market those three types of area to generate more money for us from people doing research work in those sort of sectors. But I mean, that's not really a question for tonight. It's a question probably for Victoria to think about, as we go forward with the museum strategy.
I think you and I spent a lot of time on this subject over a number of years, actually. And I can recall both meetings of this committee and indeed the Queen's Own Royal West Kent Regiment meetings where we've had this discussion. And I'm fairly sure that the message has sunk in with John and Victoria, and I'm fairly sure that they will probably consider that when they come up in a further report discussing their business plan, because certainly we do need to be looking at income earning opportunities. And I personally feel that that is an area where there is some potential. Maybe, John, you want to comment further?
No, I'll take. Thank you, Chair. I will take that back. I suspect we get a lot less inquiries for those collections. It's just obviously the local connections with the residents and family with the Queen's Own, which is why we get those inquiries come through.
Yeah, I mean, it's a piece of work. We can examine whether it is a potential in it. There may well be no potential whatsoever, admittedly. Councillor Burton.
Just really sort of a comment. I mean, I don't normally sit on this committee, so I'm not familiar with the detail that you might or might not receive. But for me, this is a nigh on impossible task to really draw a conclusion on, because it's halfway between a sort of a budget estimate and a price list. And, you know, if I'm reading it correctly, you go from £2,000 to £44,000 in you know, estimates. I'm not, is that current estimate what we're on course for? If I'm looking at that column, do you follow where I'm going with this?
So you're looking at Appendix 1?
I'm looking at the Appendix 1, the revised document that we received this evening. So you've got a column of actuals 2021, current estimate 21-22. So are we saying we're actually on course for that 44,000?
No, that's just the budget figure, but you have the performance against that budget figure in the earlier report on the agenda today,
right,
the Q2 report. So that should have given a flavour of the areas in which we're on track or not on track.
Can you help me just join the two bits together in my mind by signposting me to the earlier report where that gives me something to hang that on?
Yeah, I will just find the page. So if you look to page 18 of the agenda pack, column F gives you our forecast for this year, and column G shows where there's a variance. So you can see there's some areas that we discussed earlier, like the business terrace, where we're not expecting the income target for the year to be met. So that's the kind of wider context of current performance of those figures.
Right, so F is the variance, G is...
That we're expecting for the end of this year.
Yeah, and 26 is the... no, 19 is the target, is that right? So I've lost my columns here. This has got really convoluted, and I didn't mean want to make it this complicated, but to assess what's proposed in these fee increases, a sense of how much of each thing is to be achieved, to rationalise it out to how you get to 44,000 in the context of an underperformance in the current year.
So we're not asking for a decision on the budget at this stage. We're asking for a decision on the level at which the charge is set. So the budget managers who have proposed those charges will, of course, done that with reference to current demand for that service. So that, I guess that's that part of the puzzle. But the decision we're asking for tonight is on the price that we're charging for the service. The detailed budget estimate will come later. That's just there, as I said in my introduction, as a kind of an indicative figure based on the current budgets.
So to coin your language there, it is that piece of the jigsaw that would help me come to a conclusion on these prices. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any more questions, members? So, yes, to make that point, we're only here to agree fees and charges set out in Appendix 1 of this report. So therefore, are these fees and charges agreed as per recommendations in the papers? It's subject to, yeah, subject to the alterations, yes. Right, we're agreed, yes. Right. Members, would you like a 10-minute break now or hold it for one more item? Right, we'll go straight into the presentation then, John. It's just that my voice is really beginning to break up. Put it this way, I'll want one because my throat is just getting rougher and rougher and rougher. Right, good evening, welcome. We've got Evelyn and Rosalind here. Are you ready to go ahead? Well, we'll leave you to it then, thanking you.
I've got a very loud voice, you probably won't need that. Yeah, good evening everybody. We've met some of you before, others are new. I'm Lynn, this is Ros. I'm the Public Programming Manager at the museum, and Ros is our Learning and Events Officer. Thank you very much for asking us to come in and talk to you. We're going to basically tell you what we do, and we hope to get you as excited about what we do as we are. Over to you, Ros.
Bear with me, I'm just going to get this PowerPoint up on screen. Oh, you can see it, lovely. Okay, this is really nerve-wracking for me. I'm used to a room of 10-year-olds, not grown-ups, so feel free to pretend you're 10-year-olds. Okay, so we are going to just share with you some of what we, or most of what we do at the museum for schools. So I'm going to start with a quote from the Mendoza report. The Mendoza report was an independent review led by Neil Mendoza, outlining the key recommendations for how government can support the museum sector in England. This review was undertaken in response to the Cultural White Paper in 2016, which called for a wide-ranging review of national, local and regional museums, working closely with the Arts Council England and the Heritage Lottery Fund. It looks at what the national infrastructure for museums is and what it could be and should be. The museum is sponsored directly by government and the challenges and opportunities for all of England's museums. It states, learning is at the heart of museums. Respondents to our online consultation were most likely to select education as the primary function of museums. The team would like to see an even greater emphasis and support given to the formal education work of museums and schools. The learning team at the museum work hard on a daily basis to ensure that the quality and standard of our schools offer not only covers the needs of schools, but also showcases the museum's collection via activities that inspire learning in young people. Okay. So, the Learning and Events team at the museum are currently funded by Arts Council England through the National Museums and Schools Programme grant for the offer, with an offer for school children and students. By the end of March 2022, this will have been for a 10-year period. The original grant was for 3 years at £108,000 a year, but as the programme has been extended year on year, the grant has been reduced and currently stands at £69,000. So we're basically in year 10 of a 3-year project. The funding criteria sets out parameters and targets for the areas and schools within Kent that we should target. So the whole of Kent has been our remit. The focus was and still is on engaging schools in areas of deprivation, encouraging them and giving them opportunity to visit the museum as part of their curriculum learning. I regularly send out directly to all schools, as listed on KCC Schools List, the offers and activities we have available. Our Arts Council targets have been related to football into the museum, so we've targeted primary schools who have a more flexible timetable. However, we do have several secondary schools locally who do regularly use our resources. The funding has allowed us to have a team for delivery, including a full-time learning officer, that's me, a part-time learning assistant, that's Vicky, and a team of casual staff, which seem to change year on year, as with the casual post. We've developed a programme of workshops for schools on 19 different themes for visits into the museum, all linked to our collections. 8 themes, workshops for outreach, and a new set of 5 virtual and live lessons that we beam into schools and into classrooms. We've created 30 loans boxes for schools to borrow, each of which contain at least 10 objects, photographs and a detailed teacher pack. And we've got some of those objects from one of our boxes here, which you can have a play with later if you want to. As part of our Arts Council targets, we're also trained to deliver the Arts Awards. This is a 5-level Arts Award package that's nationally recognised. We've got 10 packages for this, 10 different offers for schools on different themes, and regularly deliver to between 150 and 400 children each year. Our Discover in a Day model is now used around the country after the Arts Award team took it and developed it as a model for all to use. The funding also allowed us to create over 200 online resources over the past 18 months for schools and families to access while learning at home. Thanks to the pandemic, we had more time to be able to develop these. Spike is our friendly iguanodon dinosaur, a mascot, here we go, just here.
He's fallen over.
We include him in either cartoon image or by photographing him in the 3D toy form on all our schools and family resources. You may have seen him pop up regularly on social media promoting these online resources and on social media getting up to all sorts of exciting things. He allows us to tie everything we do together, highlighting the resources for schools and family access and use. We built up partnerships with many other organisations, including the British Museum, Artswork, Meadow Museum Foundation, Kent Children's University, Rochester Bridge Trust and more, working on various projects, each aimed at benefiting local schools. Alongside this, we've supported the learning offers of other smaller museums around the county. We offer work experience and career support for secondary schools, and also we've had university level student teachers come and do their placements with us. I'm currently talking to a local secondary school to trial some career sessions within the school. Another focus for us has been our work on special educational needs and disabilities and access work, and the development of fidget backpacks for school and family visitors. So I've got some examples of those here, and you can see them on the screen. These contain objects for children or young people to use when visiting with their school or with family to occupy their focus so that the class and family that they're with can also enjoy looking at the collection. It includes a visit planning board that a teacher or family can use to plan what areas,
I'll be your assistant.
Thank you, areas of the museum they will be visiting that day. To accompany this, there's also a walkthrough visit online for use by schools or families prior to their visit to allow the children and young people to know what to expect before they visit. We've been able to support several museums around the country with the setup of their own fidget backpacks, thanks to it being shared by Sam Bowen in her Send in Museums training programme. And we've recently, this last fortnight, had an inquiry from a museum overseas as well to ask about how we've set it up and what we've used. We are fortunate to have a purpose-built room for delivering the school's workshops that we've already mentioned. This allows us to have classes of up to 32 children, along with accompanying adults, in the room participating in our sessions. It also allows us to do messy activities with schools, such as our Arts Awards. We're able to store our resources, including loans boxes, workshop resources, art and craft materials, and to prepare activities and relevant display objects that are used in these sessions. It is also used as a lunch space for visiting classes, alongside our other room, the smaller Ancient Lives room. A programme that has sprung from the Museums and Schools project is Wheels of Time. We're a core member of Wheels of Time. It's a scheme aimed at 4 to 11-year-olds and their families. It involves 48 small museums and heritage sites around Kent and Medway, many of which are volunteer-run and only open seasonally. This began in 2016 with just 6 heritage sites and evolved from a passport scheme as part of the Museums and Schools project that was aimed at school children who visited us or one of our partners. The aim was and still is in encouraging children to visit and revisit locations with their families once they visited us with school, with the incentive of collecting a free badge from each site. I support these museums not just for Wheels of Time, but also with their learning offers, helping them develop loans boxes, workshops and trails, as well as directing schools to them if they offer a relevant scheme or workshop. Wheels of Time is a physical badge collecting scheme. However, during the various lockdowns last year, we developed a virtual offer across many of the sites that allowed virtual visits to our websites with an activity to complete and a virtual badge to claim. This continues to run as many sites are seasonal and closed during the winter, meaning we're able to encourage visitors, virtual visitors, with the hope that they'll then visit virtually once we reopen. The scheme is growing and having recently been awarded a grant from Arts Council to develop and expand into other counties. This is in the really early stages, so it's kind of a really recent news flash, that one. Over the 10 years, the team have built up a loyal base of schools visiting, and an average of 9,000 pupils visit in a normal year. The team works with teachers and the curriculum to research, create and deliver the school's programme, maintaining a consistently high level of satisfaction in evaluation whilst meeting our Arts Council targets. These are numerical. We have to have 5,500 individual pupils visit us annually, 170 different schools visiting annually, and deliver at least 100 Arts Awards. We also support schools in their planning and curriculum development through a Teachers' Art Forum, CPD sessions, and helping them link our resources to their school development plans. One of the school engagement areas that we're really proud of is the fact that 86% of Maidstone Borough schools have used our service over the past 5 years. 86% of the schools in the borough have visited us, had an outreach, a live virtual session or used a loans box, but schools from around the county are also using our resources. We are working hard to engage the 7 schools in the borough that haven't actually used us recently. This includes the 2 newest schools. I should also add that these figures don't include the handful of private schools in the borough. We work with those too, and several of them have visited several times over the past years, many coming back regularly. County-wide, 48% of Kent and Medway schools have used our services via visits in, outreach, virtual sessions and loans boxes. We have an annual income target from Maidstone Borough Council that we work hard to meet alongside our Arts Council targets. Over the past 5 normal years, we have had an average income of just over £24,000 a year. We have regular feedback from teachers who use our service. These are just a few of the recent comments that we've had. Key Stage 2 children look forward to receiving loans boxes from Meadow Museum as they are a fantastic way of introducing a new historical subject. The objects are inspiring as they include many awesome artefacts for the children to predict what they might be. They enjoy handling the items and discussing with peers ideas of what they are and how they might have been used. As a teacher, I find the notes well written, comprehensive and easy to follow. Photos and timelines are high quality and activity ideas are creative. I look forward to my next loans boxes after Christmas. The virtual workshop has helped the children understand the mummification process much better. Being able to see the objects, even as pictures, helped them introduce the topic. Next, they want to visit the museum to see the mummy. I think we will solidify their understanding more. And third one, the children are well engaged with the activities. This is from a recent Bridges workshop, with the pace being good at keeping all involved. But our schools programme is not the only thing the learning and events team do. I'm now going to hand over to Lynn to share more.
Thank you, Ros. That was great. 86% of local schools in the borough have used the Maidstone Museum's learning service in the last 5 years. I think that's really fantastic. That was a really great overview of the museum's formal learning service with schools, school children, working with other museums, excuse me, to enhance their own learning offers. And the museum is regarded as excellent, both locally and further afield. And the learning team have hit or exceeded their museums and schools targets, which is those numerical targets, every year since the start of the investment by the Arts Council. This success has been acknowledged by the continuation of that investment for a decade now, albeit reduced on year, so it now stands at 64% of the original sum. But, you know, aside from all these facts and figures we're throwing at you, the most important thing in all of this is the enthusiasm and the interest that the team bring out in the children that they work with. Those children go away and they bring their families back to the museum. Come and have a look at this, Mum and Dad. You know, look what I saw last week at the museum. You know, we bring their history to life, and we hope we inspire them. We create new ways for them of looking at their world. These children are our future. So that's to me, anyway, is the most important part of what we do. The school service is just one aspect of this team's delivery. They also create or are involved with an enormous range of informal activities, learning activities, which I'm going to just briefly run through with you now. So these activities enable us to engage with a diverse range of communities around the borough, to provide more access to our collections, always a really important thing, because you probably know that only a small percentage of what we've actually got is out on display. Some activities, the community-based activities, are funded by grants and are free to participants, and I'll show you a couple of those in a moment. Others are charged for, and they generate income for us. In our last normal year of operation, so 2019 to halfway through March 2020, the events income was £11,000. So that's sort of added on to the 24 that the formal learning makes. So, do you want to show people what you get up to? Why not? Why not? So these come from the Make It sessions, which we hold. So during the school holidays, the learning team are really busy in that classroom. They create a whole range of crafts. People come in and do an hour-long craft workshop. They're always fully booked. Occasionally, we made them bookable in advance, I think, during COVID, didn't we? But often they're just drop-ins. So they're nice. They're lovely sort of inspiring artworks that children can get involved in. We also have trails around the museum to spot artefacts and scavenger hunts, which we, I think, charge £1 for, and then they get the badge that they all want at the end. Everybody wants a badge nowadays. We also run family fun days quite regularly. We hope to have at least one every couple of months. These have included the Fossil Road Show, which we do most autumns. We've had theatre in Brenchley Gardens. We'd love to be able to use the gardens more, actually. We really would. It would be great to use the gardens more. So this was the Iguanodon restaurant who came to us to talk about, what was his name? Mantel. Mantel. Yeah. So if you move on again, you'll see the theatre. And we had a really great audience for that. That was brilliant. That was again funded. about 4 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
2019, wasn't it?
Yeah. Or was it 19?
Yeah, wasn't
it
it
18?
19, I think it was 2019.
Yeah. They were really, really great, these people, and we helped them with their application to Arts Council. They got a grant to do this, and then they came and did the performance for us, which is lovely because it makes Brenchley Gardens that family fun place that we'd all really like it to be. So we do things like, we have the Festival of Archaeology, which we do with the Kent Archaeological Society, who are of course based in the museum, so we do that most years. And these sort of family fun days are free to attend. They're designed really to increase footfall into the museums, you know, one of our performance indicators, and to bring in new audiences. I mean, this was a great day that we had earlier this year in conjunction with the Star Wars exhibition that we had on for a couple of months. These guys are from Elstree Studios. They were reenactors. They came down for the day, all dressed up, and they were great, and rattled buckets for us, actually, which we then put in our donations boxes, which was really, really nice of them. So that was attended by 650 people through the front door, as was the Christmas market that we held a couple of weeks ago. We had just over 650 people come through the door for that. So that was nice and buzzy, you know, it makes the museum come alive when we have events like that. And of course, all these events involve this team, the Learning and Events team. Do you want to move on to the next one? So, the other things we do, of course, I don't think this gentleman, this Father Christmas, is not on this committee anymore.
You're always looking for volunteers.
That's Martin, isn't it? I think
it is,
Cox,
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's Martin Cox. It is.
He's a very good Father
He's
Christmas.
an extremely good
very
Father
good
Christmas.
He did 4 hours straight last Saturday.
Yeah, he did a double shift. So we're always looking for Father Christmases. Anyway, this is an event that we do with the Rotary Club. The Rotary Club are great. They come along, they provide the Father Christmases, we provide the elves. We were fully booked this year. You know, and I've got to say this, we are the best Father Christmas in town. There's no plastic, there's no tinsel. It's a gorgeous, peaceful, warm, candlelit, not real, of course, because we're in a Tudor timbered building, lovely place to be. And we've had some lovely comments from parents.
That was the year before last.
Yeah.
Last year we did sell out last year, but we had to cancel and refund due to obvious
That
reasons.
took us quite a while.
Yeah.
So we do events often in partnerships with local businesses. So we've got Wagamama have worked quite closely with us on an arts award, actually. Kids producing art based around the Japanese art forms. I think you took them over there and did noodle making as well, didn't you? We did. And Maidstone Distillery, they came along to our Halloween events. And of course, all these events are things that this team. Gin, yes.
Not with children.
Not with children. That doesn't involve children. So more recently, the team have been focused activity on providing for more sort of health and well-being ideas. So the socially isolated group, we saw that Golding Vision were giving out grants, specifically COVID-related grants. And we applied for one to take our objects into care homes. Because of all the communities that have been most affected by this, it was those residents who couldn't see their family and their loved ones. So we put together a whole series of boxes with different objects from the collections, different themes, and we were taking them out into the care homes, and those were free. I think we've only got a couple of free sessions left, so if you have anybody in your ward, a home that would like a session, do let us know. And I will be looking for more funding to keep that going into the future, into next year. Okay. What have we got next? So something else we've been doing, we've got a grant from Involve, it's a social prescription grant in that we invite in people over the age of 55 or those living with a long-term health condition, and we do very much the same. We do object handling, and we sit around, we have tea and cake, and people talk about their memories of living in the borough, because all of those themes are very much local. We talk about local entertainment. I mean, on the last slide, you might have spotted an ostrich egg. Anybody know why that ostrich egg is there when we're talking about local entertainment in the past? Maidstone Zoo. It's from Maidstone Zoo. So we talk about Maidstone Zoo, we talk about all the old cinemas that used to be in town, like the Palace and the Regal. We show, film clips of historic film footage of the town, and it really gets those people in every month, talking to each other, and they've become a little social group now, and I hope to continue that into the future as well, because we're talking to Involve now about doing it for year 2. So at the other end of the age spectrum, this team also run activities for the under 5s. We do stories and rhymes in one of the spaces that we use for learning, and mums and little ones come in once a month and sing along, and my office is above it, and I can hear old MacDonald had a farm, which is very nice. Then we've got our amazing museum youth group, Curates, whose average age is 12 to 16, I'd have said. That didn't meet during COVID. It's one of those things that had to be put on hold. Now we're really hoping to reinvigorate that in the new year, because this was a group of teenagers that were instrumental in creating the Ancient Lives Gallery that opened in 2017. They put together all the digital interactives with us. They were brilliant. They were really good. They worked with the designers to create games. So yeah, we're hoping to reinvigorate that group in the new year. If there is a team to run it in the future. Now I say if, because we are aware that after a decade of funding from the Arts Council, at some point they may reduce that funding. They may even cease their investment altogether. We've had no intimation of that. We won't know for a while, but without a learning and events team who are paid by that Arts Council funding, most of what we've shown you this evening, in particular, the immersive and then the inspirational experience that schools have when they come to us, it won't be happening. It will not happen. It will be very difficult to make all those things happen. So I just want to put that out there now. I don't know if John wants to say anything else about this. He felt it was important, I think, that we told you exactly what we do and how important it was to the local community and further afield. I mean, we are regarded as excellent within the county, but that there is always the possibility that this may not happen in the future if that funding is reduced to a point where we can't do these things anymore. Anyway, thank you for listening to us. We've enjoyed talking.
Thank you very much indeed. You say, let's go to John. Well, let John finish off then,
Yeah.
and then we'll probably have a few more questions.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks very much, and thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Ross. It was very good. I felt it was really important the members got to understand the breadth of the work that this team does, and also how they are funded, so that this committee is aware, and they do a lot, and I think it's very, very valued what they do, and bring a lot of animation and interest into the museum. And just thanks for Lynn as well, because I know you're suffering a little bit. Lynn has had a jab of flu in one arm and a booster in the other arm this morning. She's, yeah, I can hear it in your voice as well. So I just thanks very much for coming along. Right.
Well, I mean, one of the things I would like to start off with, I know Councillor Webb wants to say something, but I really have to say, can you make sure you can continue doing some more work in care homes, please? because I know how much the elderly like something to just stimulate a memory and get them talking. What the programme does, just a simple box of bits and pieces, can stimulate such wonderful memories and conversations and make basically brains and tongues that have been somewhat redundant into animate objects again. And to get those tongues wagging and get those minds working can be so good for elderly people. I mean, it's wonderful what you do for kids too. I'm not saying that, because you are, as the word you use, you're immersive. You actually drown them in the subject and the content and the information and the interest. And by using human communication, that's the only way to do it, and that's what you do very well. But hopefully, I'm not just speaking as chair of committee, I'm speaking very personally here. This is work that I certainly treasure and value. And I certainly want to find some ways and means in which it can be funded in some shape or form. And ideally, the Arts Council have been doing it. Let's hope they can continue to do it. But with levelling up, you never know what else we might find. But let's take some more questions from members. Councillor Webb first.
Having met you a couple of weeks ago and been shown around the museum, I have to say your enthusiasm is totally infectious, and I'm not surprised the children enjoy what they see and how they do it. It's how they do it that's really important, and I echo Councillor Round's view that this is so important for the children, for you and for the museum, that I certainly will be supporting going forward the funding for this. So well done, and keep up the good work.
Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I think you've shown the diversity of what your teams undertake, and I think it's just a sample of all what all the departments are doing at the museum, gives you the feel that the museum is more than just going along and looking at the exhibits which are on display. It's actually bringing our history to life, which are what we've heard about tonight. I think we've been lucky that we've had 10 years of funding from the Arts Council, which I know, as you mentioned earlier, Ros, was only originally for 3 years, and every year it's been rolled on. And I know the years when I've been on this committee, and every year we never know whether it's going to be rolled on. And unfortunately, their timing, they tell us, is always out of sync with our budget-making process. So picking up the chair and the vice chair's concerns, I think we need to make sure that as we go through at our January meeting, when we look at the budget, if we haven't heard from the Arts Council at that point, at which, based on previous years, is unlikely, that we perhaps have to think of a contingency figure to enable this work to go on if the Arts Council decide to reallocate the money elsewhere, because whilst clearly the work we do here is across the whole of Kent, and it's incredibly worthwhile, you do wonder how long they would continue to fund it for, given their changing priorities. And we have to make sure that we continue this work, because to get, was it 80% of our local schools using, sorry? 86%, sorry, Lynn. Yeah, of our schools using it, and also schools from across Kent, bringing all these pupils into the museum, and the work you do, as I say, going out to community groups and so on. It's just for the amount of money we spent on it. It just generates so much goodwill and so much interest in history and culture and heritage and education that the money involved is, something we do have to definitely make sure that, as I say, if the Arts Council funding ceases, that we pick it up, because it would be a betrayal of all the work done if, for any reason, it came to an end. Thank you.
Hence, further conversations needed in certain political areas. Councillor Burton.
I
I hear that message that the funding is essential, but we've got to look beyond our own resources to keep this going. It's, you know, suddenly to find 60,000 or whatever as an and is a very, very tall ask out of Maidstone's pretty meagre incomes. And I think, you know, what I would like to think this committee will do is probably a slightly deeper dive into understanding where the balance point lies. You know, we were looking at incomes that come from some of this working with schools and how that proportions against the grant funding and where the tipping point is. So I think there's a bit of detailed work and understanding that needs doing. As you went through your presentation, there were a couple of phrases, words that I heard more than once. Could do and more. So like when you talk, we could use the garden more. So I want to say, so why don't we? And too many flower beds.
Sorry, let me put that on. They installed flower beds just outside the back gates, 5 years ago? And we used to be able to put tents there, little marquees to do activities, but you can't now. It's full of pampas grass or whatever. But yeah, it would be nice to do more in the gardens. We've done teddy bears picnics out there with the author, Jane Hissey. I don't know if anybody's ever read Little Bear books.
So there's an obvious bit of joining up we need to do as a council there between remit of CHE committee and parks and how the space is actually more useful. Father Christmas was another one. I mean, massive success, a sellout success, I think. Is it just the limit of the availability of a Father Christmas? Or, I mean, how, yeah, not enough willing volunteers?
But also the fact that the museum is closed on a Sunday. So we couldn't do it on a Sunday. So it's Saturday. We did try it on a Friday during the week, but of course they're still at school. So that didn't work so well. We didn't think it was viable really, so we stuck to Saturdays for Father Christmas. But yeah, it was a sellout.
So again, there just seems to be some low-lying fruit of joining some bits up. I know opening hours is something that's going to come back to this committee at some point, but there just seems to be loads of opportunities there. And I'm not saying this in a mercenary way that it's all about money and income, because it's not. It's just about washing its face to keep providing this for children and adults and old adults to enjoy. So I've certainly learnt quite a lot there. Thank you very much.
I think Councillor Burton raises some fundamental points there. It's probably ourselves as much as yourselves to ensure that there is a lot more joined up thinking in that respect. And earlier this evening, when we spoke about the economic development team, for instance, we were looking at, you know, this council can't provide everything in terms of funding. So there are other elements of funding, grants, projects, initiatives that may be able to be sought elsewhere. I think we're in a void completely at the moment. And as I mentioned to those here, my MP actually happens to be the financial secretary of Levelling Up at the moment. And having had words with her, I don't think she actually knows whether she's coming or going at the moment. So, but what I can say is that it's something we all need to keep working on at the moment. And hopefully it would be Arts Council that maintain the service, but hopefully we could even be more ambitious and look elsewhere for bigger and better. And that's where I would like to be. It's an aspiration, it's a goal, it's a dream, but there's no harm in having it. We have to be realistic and pragmatic at the end of the day. But to end this conversation, I'm here to note this report and thank you very much. And I would like it recorded in the minutes to thank you both for attending and giving us such interesting and vital information. Thank you very much. And I'm going to now, because my throat is absolutely dry, I need a drink. So I need a slight adjournment for about 10 minutes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Can we make it back 9:15, please? Ladies and gentlemen, can we resume, please? Right, we're back on, Laura. Yeah. Right. Okay, we now go over to item 19. Mike, it's over to you. Sorry to have kept you, but it's your turn now.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, and good evening, members. This report on Maidstone Leisure Centre comes to you this evening as a report for discussion on what is a very big decision for the Council. The future of the Leisure Centre is a key part of the Making Maidstone More Active work because the centre provides the biggest leisure resource in the borough, and it will also be the central point for any expanded services that reach farther across the borough in the future. The centre has more than 800,000 visits and turns over more than £3.2 million every year. The current annual cost of that to the council is £430,000 per year. The building is getting older. It's a mixture of 70s and 90s design, and we need to decide what the future of that building looks like beyond 2024 when the current arrangement ends. So through Sport England, we've been using their diagnostic tool and one of their leisure consultants, and that work is presented as Appendix 1 in the papers. And at this stage, all options are on the table, and this report is presented this evening for discussion, as I said, to allow members to give an indication of what other evidence and information would help in your decision making. We have identified that the future requirements of the Leisure Centre need to address three areas, which are the social factors, the environmental factors and the financial factors, and those are in more detail in section 2 of the report. In section 3, I've identified that options are forming in 3 core areas. There'll be multiple variations under each one of those core areas, but those headline headline areas are repeat, refurbish and redevelop. So the repeat option is the easiest one to describe. It's a continuation of what we're currently doing. That can be as an extension of the current contract or a new contract on new terms, but in the same building, with the building used in the same way it is now, with annual repairs and maintenance requirements ongoing. The redevelop option would be a new leisure centre on the same site. That could be on the existing footprint of the current building or close to it. And as part of the options and feasibility of that Sport England work I mentioned, we've been looking at how a redevelopment could be accommodated on the site. It's quite a tight area because of the residential, the park and the sports clubs next door. But we've identified 4 locations which are included as Appendix 2. So to briefly summarise those locations, number 1 is to build on the same space as the current leisure centre, which would mean closing it during the build for a period of between 2.5 to 3 years, with all the disruption that goes along with that. Be a large impact to the health and activity levels of the borough, and that would need careful consideration. To avoid that, the other 3 locations would be number 2 on the car park, and then replace the car park where the leisure centre currently is. This is possible, but the lack of car park in both build phases would need careful management again. Location 3 is the land to the north of the centre, but in addition to the historic park location, that area also includes a strip that has local wildlife site designation, and that would involve a number of planning considerations, so that's going to be a challenge. And then location 4 is the rugby pitch, closest to the leisure centre car park, and that land's not owned by the council, it's owned by the cricket club, who lease it to the rugby club. We've had initial conversations about this possibility with both clubs, and they are aware that this is being presented this evening, so it doesn't come as any surprise to them. In principle, they're happy to discuss and explore this further, but they make no commitment beyond that at the moment. And Appendix 3 shows one version of how that scheme might look in the future, which would involve moving the rugby pitch allocation somewhere else, either as a grass pitch or an artificial pitch. And that's something we can explore in more detail with the clubs if that's something that the committee wants us to work up for them or for you. Then the refurbishment option is retaining the current building and making changes to it to address those social, environmental and financial factors. Through a refurbishment scheme, we could focus on certain areas of the building only, or the whole building. It really is a sliding scale of how much work we wanted to do to that. This option really sits between the refurb option and the redevelop option, and it's kind of everything in between. So crucially with this option, we could set a budget and work to that budget, making those social, environmental and financial improvements as we go. But this option would also involve need for a closure or part closure, which would again require careful management. So those are the three core headings: repeat, refurbish, redevelopment, and some of the sub-options below them. And as you can see, there are a lot of possibilities. So at this stage, it would be useful to hear your thoughts and comments on the report, so that feedback arising from today can be used to inform further, more detailed work, and we can start crystallising some options. Before handing back to you, Chair, for questions or any clarifications, I wanted to highlight a couple of key points that are in the report. The first is something that's not in the report. So it doesn't include any discussion about bringing services back in-house, or and that's a deliberate omission. So any one of the options can be run in-house, or it can be outsourced, and we can look at that in due course. So this report is focusing more on the asset and the facility. So I wanted to mention that in case that is a question that members are about to ask. And the second one is Moat Hall, which is included at paragraph 2.14. The sports hall at Maidstone Leisure Centre doubles as a sports hall and also as a concert and events venue. And by being both those things at the same time, it creates a lot of challenges and removes much needed sports hall availability from the community, something we currently have an undersupply of across the borough. So one decision as part of this work is deciding if we want that dual function and that dual purposing of the sports hall to continue, or if we want to have more of a sports focus, which would inevitably have knock-on effects for concerts and events in the borough. So another big decision, but hence wanting to raise this point specifically, and I'd be interested to hear members' thoughts on that one in particular. So thank you, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions and clarify any points. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Mike. You've actually opened up probably quite an area of debate and questions. I mean, the area of events and concerts, for instance, is one particular area that I certainly would think of. The other thing is, of course, costings. That's a big issue that goes with it. But I'm sure these questions will emerge over the period of this evening, and indeed furthermore. So I will start the debate with Councillor Harper.
Oh, wait a minute, it's come on now. Well, thank you, Mike, for that. There's a lot of information in this report. I've gone through it once, but luckily, as you said, we're not making a decision tonight, so that I think will give me time to read it through another time and make more notes and understand and try to digest everything there is in it. One of the things I would think it might be worth us considering or trying to understand is some of the economics here, because as you say, we could just sort of continue it on as it is now, which I would have thought probably doesn't really take us anywhere in terms of the future of Moat Park, or the options probably are more looking at refurbishment or redevelopment. Now, when we kicked this off 3 years ago, I was rather sceptical about the idea of redevelopment, as John and yourself will know, but I've changed my mind, I must admit, having seen Dover and looked at some of the other leisure centres which have been redeveloped as the opportunities that's then given those councils. And I'm more converted to the idea of looking at redevelopment, but I would think what we need, one of the things we need to understand is really how we fund it. Now, presumably, we would be doing what they call I can't think the words now. It's the prudent loan funding from the Public Works Loan Board. And if looking at the type of costs of a redevelopment, I don't know, what, 30, 40 million pound might be the types of figures you could be looking at for a facility of the size we would want, as opposed to, say, refurbishment, which could be 5, 10 million pound, or, you know, as you said, a figure, almost any figure you could do a refurbishment of. It's worth understanding how much a loan would cost and what the repayment figures would be on those type of quantums, because while, say, a completely new leisure centre for, you know, I don't know, 30, 40 million pound, it is a massive amount of money, and clearly it is. If the cost of servicing the loan we would take out after any grants or any other funding, SIL or Section 106, worked out to be less than the income generation we might get. Because looking at the models, almost in every example where you've rebuilt a leisure centre of the age of where we are, you move from the council paying the developer, the operator, circa £400,000, to the operator paying the council anything up to £1 million a year. So rather than a cost to the council, it suddenly becomes a big income generator. And I think it would be useful to understand the economics. As I say, if we're borrowing the amount of money to do a new leisure centre, would the interest rate, the interest payments, would they say be £500,000? But if we're likely to be getting £1 million of net income to us, then obviously it's an affordable proposition. If you like, the net income to us, I don't know, was only going to be £500,000 and the capital financing costs would be £700,000, then it's a different equation. So I think in terms of looking at all the types of opportunities you presented to us, I think we need to really understand that so that we ultimately, at some point down the road, can make a decision knowing the economics behind this, because it is going to be whatever we do, a big investment. One of the other areas which you mentioned was about Moat Hall, but I remember going in 2019 or 2018 to a Sports England conference just for chairs of leisure services. There was about 10 of us. And one of the things which came out very strongly there was that when they're looking to redevelop leisure centres, they consider what other ancillary services you might bring in. And they quoted quite a few would have libraries or GP surgeries or community centres often put on the co-located site, because you get the economies of scale. You know, you might only need one reception to focus on many different things. So one of the things it might be worth looking at is with Moat Park, assuming that's where we remain, what other type of service functions could we possibly consider perhaps putting up there with a refurbished or redeveloped leisure centre? And things I just scribbled down was GPs, libraries, community centres, nurseries. There's a whole remit of what you could put, which could work quite well with one. And then you mentioned the issue of Moat Hall. Well, everyone on this committee who's been on the committee for a number of years or even more recently will know that one of the things I'm keen on, and I think a lot of the council is looking at the opportunity for a proper larger scale auditorium. We know we've got the Hazard Theatre, which works well in terms of the size it's got, but what we don't really have is a bigger auditorium of 500, 600, 700 people in the borough, which would operate at a different level, more like if you think of somewhere like the Meadow Theatre. And whether, you know, at the moment we've got Moat Hall, which we all know well as we do our council meetings there at the moment, but trying to use that as a venue and an auditorium as well as a sports hall, you end up being somewhere in the middle. Probably works well when it's used as a sports hall, but for music events and other events, that's not really what it's designed to do. So perhaps we should also, within the work streams we're looking at, and this is probably a wider thing for Mike to work with people like Anne-Marie and possibly, the wider economic development team, think about an auditorium, because is Moat Park the right place for an auditorium? If it is a auditorium shared with a sports hall the right approach? Because on the face of it, it would seem to me it probably not. But we need, again, sort of facts and figures to help us, I think, as we move on. So there's a massive amount of information in here, and I think the economics of it, obviously as an economic committee, are key, but also in terms of being prudent in the terms of the way we approach this. But the opportunity, as I say, to me looks redevelopment, but understanding more of the economics of that, because that could give us not only money to fund the capital costs, but money to actually have a positive and a proactive sports development budget, which is something this council's never had. And if you look at the sort of figures some of these leisure centres generate, like Dover, the one we went to the other week, was £1 million, I think. It contributes to Dover Council, as opposed to them having to subsidise their previous leisure centre by about a couple of £100,000 a year. You're talking of turnarounds of £1.5 million almost. Massive changes in the economics of sport, and so we just need to bear all of that in mind. And would we get any of those benefits if we did say a refurbishment? I don't know. That's the type of information I, for one, would like to see. So I hope that's all useful for a start.
I think there's some very valid points there, Paul, and certainly the auditorium issue is an important one that needs a lot of consideration. I can tell that you have been affected by the visit to Dover, where it was significant that their new centres virtually quadrupled their footfall since they've had a new centre, and I have to admit, even I was staggered by what a new centre has done in terms of the figures that they've generated to quadruple your amount of business so quickly. It was amazing, and to see all those elder people playing table tennis at 10 o'clock in the morning was quite a significant event. I see Councillor Nagy wanted to raise your hand.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very disappointed tonight. I've sat on this committee for many years, and I think all of us that visited Dover was of the opinion that is what the people of Maidstone deserve. That's what the council is here for, to supply something for people to do in Maidstone that's at an excellent standard. Now, where is option 5, the one we previously talked about, where you build, have you all got this picture? Where we build something right here, we own the land, we could keep this centre going, we don't interfere with no one else, and we keep running this centre. And then when it's all developed and we got our state-of-the-art leisure centre, because I live in Maidstone, I would like to have some decent facilities for a change. And when it's done, then we maybe could do something with this bit of land and have an actual decent theatre. Because here is everything we've got. The parking, everything is here with a bit of planning. So I'm very disappointed that, where's option 5? We've talked about it, I've talked about it many times. I mean, if you think about the money, we spent up to 25 million at Loch Meadow, 19.2 million for a lease and the rest for maintenance, right? That was not even buying the building. So someone decided, I wasn't part of that decision, that we could afford 25 million quite easy. So if it is 30 million or 40 million, I think the people of Maidstone deserve what we saw in Dover. And if you'd been to Dover, you'd think, oh, climbing walls, table tennis in the room, all the things that we don't offer. And it's just because they have got a lovely, up-to-date leisure centre. And I would like to propose that we have an option 5, because whatever we do will not last, it's going to have to last my lifetime. And to see something there in that bit of land, which we own, no doubt about it, we own, we can keep our present thing going. And then, as you all said, look how much that centre makes when it's got decent facilities. It's got outside football pitches, like on the grass. They're used all the time, and they're used by clubs that organise it all. We don't have anything like that in Maidstone, and it's about time we had a vision. We talk about it all the time, and to have a state-of-the-art leisure centre, option 5, in my opinion, should be at least looked at this stage. Because if you ask the people what they want, I'm sure, I'm not perfect, this is what they like to see. And then when we have got that, maybe have a state-of-the-art theatre. Because everyone seems to be travelling away from Maidstone for their entertainment, when we could have it in Maidstone. I'll give you the example when Maidstone United came back to Maidstone. The average gate was going to be about 600 or 700. It's 2,000 now. And Maidstone United is part of the community. And I think if I'm going to stay on this committee, I will propose an option 5, because it's all there. If you look at all the other options, they're a bit of a nightmare and will cost more money, in my view. So it would be nice to have an option 5. I am going to propose it, maybe somebody might second it, that we do look at it at this stage, because I think it's very important to know how much a new one would be on that part of Moat Park. And I'd like to propose that. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Nagy. I get where you're coming from, but at the moment this is purely and only a discussion. And whilst it is an option that you want to paint, a particular option, we're only looking at very vague options of repeat, refurbish, and redevelop. You're looking obviously for the redevelop possibilities. There are several different redevelopment opportunities, as well as refurbish opportunities and repeating opportunities. This is just a case for us to have a forum to have a few words and a few thoughts and a bit of input to assist the manager, the officer who's charged to take this work on. Now, he has a lot of more investigation to do, and that includes a complete redevelopment. So the aspiration, the goal is still there, but we must look at other options. We must look at other options because it's pragmatic to do so. It's pertinent to do so in terms of the economics and the costings. So we're not writing off that dream and that aspiration. We're just investigating every single possibility around those 3 R's. If you want to come back, please do so, but Councillor Webb's burning to get in.
I don't think we ever talked about going onto the cricket rugby pitch at all. I've never heard, because I've been here a few years, I've never heard us talking about an option which included the cricket and the rugby, because that's a lack of facility. So I don't know who put the option in.
Well, that option's come about in the fact that officers have actually been resourcing possibilities. So they've looked to the obvious neighbours to look at those possibilities. John Foster, would you like to come in?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Nagy, thank you very much. Just for those who are viewing remotely, can you just say that your option 5 is where, please? So just for those who are viewing remotely, Councillor Nagy is just pointing to Moat Park, just behind the Moat Leisure Centre. Thank you.
Are you saying you want an official... we're not here to make recommendations, though, Dave.
No, I'm just suggesting that, as we're looking at all the options, that should be an option, in my view, to be looked at. Thank you, Chairman.
we're certainly noting that in this discussion because the officer charged with this work will take note of that. But we're actually just, for want of better words, we're just banding about thoughts at the moment. We're not here to make any recommendations, and even if we did, it would be subject to other committees to make them. Councillor Webb.
Yes, thank you. I note Councillor Nagy's enthusiasm for having been on the committee for an extraordinarily length of time. But I'd like to come back to 3 key points. The Leisure Centre is only one part of the Earl Committee's remit, and I think it's very, very important that we have a coordinated development of leisure activity across the town. I would like to thank Mike for this report. It is incredibly thorough. It's taken me a long time to read it, and I like what I read, but, and there is a but, what I need further evidence of and detail will be a thorough financial breakdown from beginning to end. I personally can't see any change happening much before 2024, because I think we've got to take a rational, we've got to take a calm, and we've got to take a pragmatic approach, because we've got to look at MBC finance as a whole. As great as a new leisure centre is, and I don't underestimate what you're saying, Councillor Nagy, I agree with you, but I think we have to put this into perspective of the development of Maidstone as a whole. Thank you.
Ever the practimus, Councillor Webb. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. What Councillor Nagy has said about a 5th option, I think at this stage, you know, if that is a slightly different option, we should be gathering all of the options together and refining them a bit so that everything is on the table. One of the things that's influencing my thinking about this, and I think it was alluded to, is that as our borough develops, should we be thinking about whether we actually need more than one resource like this for our residents, with all the quality and attributes that Councillor Nagy was imploring that we should have? You know, I think that's something that we've got to seriously consider. I did read in some of the information at one stage that basically the majority of the people that use the place live within 1 mile. Now, I accept that there's a lot of people that are in that catchment, but I do wonder, you know, what we are thinking about, you know, future proposals. Were we to, for example, have a significant new settlement, you know, somewhat further south, you know, do we need to distribute these kinds of facilities around? You know, I look at our neighbours up the road and they have more than one leisure offering. So, you know, I think we're at a very early stage. I certainly want to understand some of the early financial thinking behind this, really do. I'm not saying it's not right, but I'm going to take a bit of convincing on 3.20, that it's so much more expensive to refurbish. You know, you can do a lot of refurbishment for 30 odd million. I'd be wanting a lot of change, but you know, I need to see some more detail to start to understand that. I think we will ultimately have to look at this as a kind of a hybrid situation with the ambitions of cricket and rugby, and I think we're probably all fairly aware that, you know, only, was it today or this week, I lose track, there was a certain piece of planning lobbying that fell through our emails where there's a suggestion that a rugby club could be supported at a different site altogether. You know, there's all sorts of things, lots of horses running in this race. It does kind of make me think that, you know, if we're looking at something that comes to term in August 24, I think is what I was reading. You know, even if we were fairly certain about what we're going to do at this stage, you know, procurement, design, tendering, contractors, build time, it seems to me like we're going to need some sort of interim arrangement on the table anyway. So I'm going to take a lot of convincing to get to the knock it down and start again point, but I don't rule that out. Favour a dispersal perhaps of the offering across the borough. I mean, there's traffic and congestion implications around that as well. If you put absolutely everything that's top-notch in one place, well, that's where everybody wants to go on a Saturday morning, isn't it? You know, is it wise? So early days, I think I'm probably favouring a refurbishment type of thing, but let's keep it rolling.
Thank you. Councillor Harper. Councillor Cannon.
Yeah, I would like to just go into a very, very simple point, and that is, it talks about swimming provision, and I think maintaining swimming provision is just very important. Whatever we do, whatever we choose to do, having that gap in potential local people not being taught to swim is actually very significant, and we really need to just think about that in whatever we do. And also, you know, we know that swimming provision is actually not, you know, it's not good enough in Kent. People want to swim more. There's not long enough pools. So I think that's a very important thing going forward. And I think, for me, that the element of swimming going forward is not because I'm mad about swimming or anything, but it's just, I think it's, yes, it's something that the private sector doesn't actually provide for too much. You know, there's a great climbing wall over across the river. There's lots of other elements. There's lots of gyms in Maidstone. And I think it is important going forward that we really think and prioritise providing good swimming and lessons for children in the area. So that's just something that sort of really stands out quite, I know it's very early at this stage. And then I know that you've talked about the contract not being in this deliberately. So I mean, the one element is that I know that Serco has had a lot of money from us during the pandemic. And so I think one thing there is that I really would like, I don't know when that will come up, maybe you can explain, but I think that is an important point, how we structure that from the very top. What is the contract going forward? Is it us running it? Is it trust? Because I think that's a very important starting point. So I'd just like to understand when that will be talked about as well.
Certainly points that I would probably want to raise, because swimming actually does do it for me. I won't go into history, but swimming has been my lifesaver. So I'm a great believer in swimming. I have to use private facilities to do it. Because it's nearer to me. So as a person who lives in a rural parish, I would love to think that I would have a much bigger and better swimming pool somewhere around Headcorn and Staplehurst area. But most people I know tend to go to Cranbrook to swim. And that in itself is a bit of, that says something. It's another authority. It's not Maidstone providing that, unless you go to certain private facilities. So swimming is very important, and particularly when it stops them being drowned in local rivers. Anyway, Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I think we all need to remember we're not being asked to make a decision, just to give information for the officers to look further forward. This does give us data as to where the current membership scheme is, and I was surprised actually, because although Shepway North and Parkwood do come up very prominent, Shepway North and Parkwood do come up very prominent. When you look at it, Bearsted is the third highest number of people who have memberships of the leisure centre. and some of the other areas in the urban part have relatively low take-up. So it's quite interesting to understand how people go to different places. Perhaps we need to factor in sort of private sector, centres and so on, just to understand that as well. And I think there is a reference I know in the report when I was reading it today, talking about the fact that Moat Park is in the centre of Maidstone, and that the borough, it refers definitely to the southern part of the borough, saying it's not a sufficient population for its own leisure centre, but it does refer to, I think, the fact that obviously the development going on in Paddock Wood, and I think there seems to be a proposal as part of that sort of growth there, that there may be a leisure centre for swimming pool, say in Paddock Wood, which might service the southern part of the borough, and equally obviously I think it refers to Heathlands, and obviously as that project goes forward, that might create the critical mass where you might be able to see a secondary centre there. But I think, for definitely the medium term, next probably 20 years, Moat Park is going to be the centre for the borough, as it probably should be. I mean, it's got a lot of other sporting facilities, as Councillor Nagy pointed out, the rugby and the squash and the cricket. I think we do, as I say, it comes to economics. I can understand Councillor Burton being slightly needing to have the case made out, and that's right, and I think we should do. As I said, when I started out on this journey 3 years ago, and as I say, even Alison Broom, I was quite clear with her. I said, for me, it's the swimming pools which make Moat Park, having that range of pools which you very rarely would ever see anywhere else, apart from somewhere like Crystal Palace, where you'd have sort of 5 different pools, diving pool, fitness pool, various training pools, and the fun pool. And whatever we did, I always wanted to see that type of facility either retained or re-provided in a new centre. But having seen Dover and seen what you now can do with these, and I'm sure other places where you've actually got the movable floor, basically. So while we were at the Dover Leisure Centre a couple of weeks ago, when we first got there, the floor had been lowered to something like 1.3 metres, and it was being used for, aqua aerobics. And then while we were having our discussion with the officers, they actually rose the floor up to floor level, so it drained all the water off. And then when we went around the tour, then we came back, and I think there was a school in there, so the floor had gone down to about 0.5 metre in depth. And you suddenly think, because one of the things we do have is a diving pool. It struck me as we don't necessarily need a diving pool per se. You could have a pool where, again, you can do, perhaps the technology's there to raise and lower a floor. Technology's moved on, I think, and it's continuing to. And the fact that these movable floors have only come in the last couple of years means that, they do just offer you so much more flexibility than you might have had in the past. And I quite like the idea of having a fun pool where some of it's indoors and some outdoors. Tunbridge swimming pool has an outdoor swimming pool as part of its centre, doesn't it? And I think, doesn't Faversham have an outdoor pool as part of it? So, opportunities, perhaps we should also consider, not everything has to be indoors in a new centre. The temperature is getting warmer. There might be an opportunity for an outdoor pool as part of this as well. So let's just leave everything on the table. Give Mike as much, opportunities to look into it all. And if ultimately we decide that we're going to refurbish as opposed to rebuild, then as long as we've got facts and figures and can see the case, not only from people's fitness, making Maidstone more active, but obviously the economics of it, then I think we can all hopefully travel on this journey together. But we've got some time ahead of us, so we don't have to rush anything tonight. That's what I just really urge, is that we just take this through the process as it goes. Mike's going to give us a load more stuff. We could, and I did suggest perhaps to to John and to Mike if we could visit a leisure centre which has been refurbished as opposed to be rebuilt, because we've seen lots of brand new ones, but it'd be useful to see some of the sites. And I think you mentioned Ashford when we were in Dover, to understand how a refurbishment would actually work in practice.
Thank you. Now I'm going to hand back to Mike, because you've obviously heard quite a few contributions from various members so far. So I'll give you a chance to have your say back, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, members. That's been really, really useful to gather those thoughts. I can certainly reflect some of those, well, all of them, in the next reports, which will be some financial modelling on those that kind of borrowing cost and the increase in finance we can see at the leisure centre through more memberships and more participants, and that balance of revenue and capital that Councillor Harper was talking about. On the 1 mile radius point, Councillor Burton, that was mentioned previously, because that's something that stuck with me as well. But through the Sport England work and some work Serco did with this is on page 161 of the agenda papers. There's a map, and this might be what Councillor Harper was talking about with the Bearsted as well. And actually the dispersal of members is a lot greater than a mile, which is contradictory to what we were previously told by the work that we'd done through the Making Maidstone More Active survey. So this is membership data. And people are travelling far and wide. And on the Serco tour we had of the Maidstone Leisure Centre, they presented to us about their destination site, and people travel from further afield than just our borough for a day trip. They're not members. So yeah, anything we do will cater for a wide population, but that doesn't negate the fact that the southern area is growing, and we need to time a new facility if that's what we want to do with the house growth. So we have that capital, that critical mass point. And I think it was Councillor Cannon who talked about public sector swimming. This is a real crucial point as well. The swimming pools on that scale, as Councillor Harper described, they cost a lot of money to run and operate 365 days a year. Even during lockdown, they had to be kept running a kind of threshold level to avoid any hygiene problems when you reopen them. And the public sector does that really well. The private sector can't do it because there isn't that money in running pools to that level. But you need your gym to be on the same site, because the gym is the bit where you make membership sales through people having a £30-40 a month membership, and having those two sites side by side makes the economies work. So yeah, I know in previous conversations we've talked about dividing the centre up, and can you put the gym in that part of the borough, and can you put the pool there? But actually the economics of the staffing and the facility operation means they work best when they're together, if anyone was wondering that point. But yeah, on the whole, Chair, that's been really useful. Thank you very much, members.
You haven't got off yet. Sorry, Mike. We've still got a few more members so far. Councillor Newton.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a specialist in anything like this, but looking at these options, 2, I presume that's building on a car park. 4, I wouldn't even be considering that particular area. But what we ought to be as a council is looking at the best facilities that we can provide to attract people to come here. Possibly Olympic-sized swimming pools, or an Olympic-sized swimming pool will attract people to come. Just on the swim, forget outside. I wouldn't be going outside. I can go. There's enough sea around here to swim without cold water. I mean, I've spent 2 years ago down in Plymouth, and they have a fantastic outside structure there that's behind the lighthouse. Nobody ever goes in it. It's too damn cold. And so I wouldn't be going down that. I'm not a specialist, but I think we should be looking to be giving our residents the best they can to help young people to get to Olympic status. They've done it with the gym in Tovel. Superb. We ought to be doing something similar here, but I think it needs a lot more open thinking. Anyway, I've said my bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Gordon. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. I do just want to come back on this 1 mile thing. So, whilst it might be right to pick me up on the literal 1 mile, though that is what was reported to us previously, but if you do look at that chart on page 161, you cannot but conclude that it is heavily town-centric and very much related to transport routes. You cannot come away from that. And I'm just saying, but the borough is a little bit bigger than that. I wasn't going to say this, but I think I am now. There's an enormous amount of officer enthusiasm for a major project here. And I think we welcome that. We welcome the professional advice for our consideration, but it's not a done deal yet. I attended a meeting with one of our MPs recently, and I was semi-shocked that in giving them an update on what's going on, they were handed plans for Moat Park because we'll need funding for that. It's good to get the enthusiasm, but it was almost presented as a done deal. And I just want to say, look, it's not. Everything's on the table. It's not being ruled out. But, when we sort of skew it to say, well, forget what we told you about 1 mile a little while ago, it's actually like this. Well, it is still quite centric, and I think we've got to take our time over this. And like I said to you earlier this evening, I was an Elmer cynic at the beginning, and I became a convert. So my mind's not closed to turning things around, but we're a long way from a decision and a direction.
Thank you, members. Mike, did you want to come back on anything? Because you've had a wide variety of thoughts and input to digest there, and a great deal more to go away and consider. But did you want to come back?
I hear, yes, please, Chair. Yeah, I hear Councillor Burton's sentiments loud and clear. And if our enthusiasm has come across in the wrong way, then yeah, we take his points on board. We've been talking to the architect about a refurbishment scheme, sort of a hybrid model. This thinking came about after the report was put together, and so it couldn't be included. But it's based on how much of the building could be feasibly kind of keep as a hybrid model, and how much could be brand new, and how much could be existing. So you kind of build on one half of it, looking at some of the steel structures that are there if we wanted to do that. So the sports hall is one thing. So the sports hall being a steel structure, if we're going to knock it down and build another one, let's keep the one we've got and build around that and keep half the building running while the other half gets built. So I'm hoping to bring that hybrid refurb plan to a future meeting with the architect's input as well, as they understand the kind of the levels of the ground and things like this a lot better than we do as kind of non-specialists. So yeah, hear the message loud and clear. Thank you.
Chairman, if I just say, not knocking the enthusiasm at all, I think that's brilliant. It's loads of professional advice, but let's just not get ahead of ourselves quite yet. But welcome the enthusiasm, Mike, really do.
Clearly, there's still a great deal of work to be done, and I think Mike certainly knows that. Councillor Nagy, you still want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. So basically what I'm saying, option 3 or 4 could go where I've suggested. So if we've got quotes for 3 and 4 to do them, then we could put that in where I'm suggesting. Because they're both new build, aren't they? Even option 2 new is a new build. And they would both fit it just seems common sense to me. You can build something there, doesn't interfere with anything, the services keep going on, carry on until we finish, And then we keep our swimming and everything going while that one's being built, which will be a couple of years. I just think if that could be looked at some time or other, because it's obviously done a lot of work here. I wasn't expecting to see one in the car park and one on the cricket ground, because I can't ever remember that being mentioned. But obviously they've become options now, and he's been working on it. But option 3 and 4 could easily be put in that little lovely corner bit, in my view. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, just bear with me. Can I just ask members, if necessary, to go to page 130? And remind members that the report only has one recommendation, and that recommendation is that the feedback arising from the discussion, this discussion that we've had on the report, is to be used to inform a further report to committee with more detailed proposals on the future of Maidstone Leisure Centre. Now that covers every single possibility that we may have arisen tonight, in my opinion. But if you do go to page 130, you will see that this next steps are part of this, where it includes a good many factors that includes the revenue modelling of the refurbishment scheme and the redevelopment scheme. So additional reports may be required for that. If you do wish to make a proposal, I ask you, Councillor Nagy, to confirm that proposal, and can Councillor Newton further second that proposal? In the light of these recommendations and the way the paper's written, and to me it's been well written enough to confirm a lot of the vagaries that we're talking about, I think we have a good enough recommendation. But I'll go for a formal proposal, and I'll go for a vote on it.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I was sitting here. Obviously, he's looking at option 4 and 3. Now, there will be proposals for new buildings on those sites. And in my view, looking at this plan, those options could go onto the corner plot quite easily. Because to me, the car park, option 2, shouldn't really be considered at all, in my view. I don't remember us talking about building on the existing car park or going onto the cricket ground. I don't ever remember talking about that. But the thing is, for me, is the most simple rebuild is in that corner. And I don't mind, as long as it's looked into, because we obviously don't want to put more work this man's way. But the size of option 4 and 3, could it quite easily fit into that bit of Moat Park? That's all I'm asking, is if we're going to look at those plans, those 3 and 4 can be quite easily put into there if it's decided to be the best place. Because it's a new build, hardly a tree in the way, and we've got all the access there. It just seems to be the way to go. And we keep our existing centre going until this one's ready. So we can still offer some facilities to the people of Maidstone. That's my thinking. Thank you.
I have 2 members wishing to come in on this subject. Councillor Burton first.
Very simply, Chairman, we're going way beyond the intention of this evening's report. I move that the committee notes the report and asks that officers give due consideration to the comments expressed this evening in the development of further proposals.
My point is, I believe the recommendation allows officers to have listened to this debate and make notes. But if somebody wishes to...
I'm happy to second that. I mean, I just think Councillor Nagy's issue can be taken up as part of moving on. I think, as has been pointed out on paragraph 7.1, there's going to be quite a few more reports coming back to us. But I can see almost 3 or 4 reports here, tenants condition survey, and all the options. We're a long way from having to make a decision. That's probably the best way, because we've got people who think perhaps refurbishment's away, perhaps do nothing, perhaps rebuild. And the information as we go forward will help us all coalesce our ideas. But tonight is far too early to go down with any proposed suggestions. So I think we just note it as you suggest and look at the next steps programme to take us through it.
Right, I should take the formal proposal and say, Councillor Nagy, you're making a formal proposal. If so, can you give me the words for your formal proposal, please, and your second?
With respect, Mr. Chairman, I believe there is a motion and a seconder, and that needs to be taken.
We will vote on it when we hear exactly what the proposal is.
Thank you, Chairman. All I'm asking for is consideration be given to this plot. And if you're telling me all our comments tonight, including mine...
Councillor Nagy, we will be giving consideration to these issues as part of this whole report. Are you asking for a specific proposal? It doesn't sound like you are, because we will consider every single aspect that's been brought to this discussion tonight.
That's all I wanted to hear, Chairman, because in my view, if you don't mention these things when you have the opportunity, other things take place, other people come in and change things around, so you end up with a nightmare. So all I'm asking for is something be considered, like I've said tonight, and that's all I've asked for, and you've covered it very well. Thank you.
Thank you. So therefore, I'm asking members to consider the recommendations as published, that the feedback arising from the discussion on the report be used to inform a further report to the committee with more detailed proposals on the future of Maidstone Leisure Centre. Is that accepted? Unanimously, it's agreed. Thank you very much. Right, it comes finally to presentation on the Maidstone Riverside Light Walk. Alexa, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Chairman and members. Thank you very much for your time this evening and for staying late. I'm going to talk a bit about the sort of little bit of the background and then hand over to Felix Lewis, the architect, who's going to talk about our kind of fresh ideas for the Riverwalk. So you remember in September I came to your meeting with, let's call it a conversation starter, which was the Rainbow Walk, and it certainly started a conversation, and I think it's safe to say that from the feedback, Maidstone isn't quite ready for an illuminated rainbow dinosaur bone walk. So, but thank you for your support at the meeting and the sort of support for us to develop the idea further. So we created a working group with various councillors, Maidstone River Partnership and others, and we visited the site with the aim of agreeing priorities, which we have narrowed down to the following: to make the most of our river, to improve accessibility to both sides of the river, public safety improvements, including improvements to lighting to the sites, flood reduction measures and biodiversity improvements. So these priorities have formed the basis for kind of our next set of ideas, and Felix is going to go through them with you. Are you there, Felix?
I am here. Good evening, everybody.
Excuse me, can I just briefly interrupt, Alexa? We normally get to about 10:15 when we make a decision as to whether we wish to continue or whether we wish to adjourn. It's reached that point now, I'm afraid. So in fairness, I have to ask members whether they wish to continue hearing or whether to adjourn, and I have to make that decision now. So members, would you wish to hear the presentation or do you wish to adjourn? Can I have Councillor Burton?
I believe the shut-off time is 10:30 if we don't vote to continue until 11. I think we should continue no later than 10:30. This is just a presentation, and it's an early stage of progress as it's already been indicated to us. So I would be willing to receive 15 minutes more presentation and then we close.
Great. Can you?
That seems all right, Alexa. Can you do that?
Yes, we'll be very quick. Sorry, Lara, I've got that feedback again. The echoing. Thank you. I think you have to turn something off. Can you see the presentation on your screens?
Yeah, we can. Sorry, you're muted, but we can see it.
You can see it. Great. Okay.
You can see it, can you? So you're looking at a photo montage of the riverbank at the front.
Over to you, Felix. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen. What I wanted to do was just to express to you all some initial ideas that we've had, and as Alexa pointed out, it's very much early stages. What we have is a beautiful summer's day here. Picture of some of basically the nicest historic river buildings in town, alongside potentially a beautiful stretch of the river, and there's no one there. What you're looking at is a rather overgrown sort of concrete embankment that was built up, I think, in the sort of late 70s. There's no biodiversity to speak of with the river. It floods on a regular basis, as we all know, and that concrete upstand there, when it does flood over the top, it silts up that footpath, making it incredibly slippery, unsafe to go to. And it's dark, and it's a rather unpleasant place for what really ought to be one of the most beautiful parts of the town, particularly where you look where it is. It's obviously at the bottom end of the high street, straight over Maidstone Bridge. It's part of the Medway path. It should be a linking space between the town centre and Loch Meadow Entertainment Centre, which there's an awful lot going on there now, including the new food hall. And it should be part of a longer walkway. I mean, it is theoretically, but practically it should be part of a much longer walkway that goes all the way down to East Farley and beyond. You've also got a rather elegant footbridge that connects the east and the west bank to the Memorial Park, again, another very underused space. And then, as I alluded to, the beautiful group of historic buildings, the All Saints Church, Archbishop's Palace, and the Carriage Museum. And in my view, not enough is made of that area. It wasn't always like that. Maidstone, this part of Maidstone, has been settled for an awfully long time. It's got a very, very rich history. And in that picture alone, you can see the group of buildings we're talking about. You can also see that an urban waterfront can also be a natural waterfront. It doesn't have to be a hard concrete edge. It can be a riverfront that accommodates a certain amount of flooding. And it can be a place that has a great deal of biodiversity, which is what we'd be looking for. So this is where we are at the moment. We have obviously the Millennium Path, the Jubilee Path that walks along. In the centre there, you can see the old jetty site that's kind of rather unloved. There's no real explanation of what it is or why it's there. You can walk under the Millennium Footbridge, and then it starts to become sort of a more pleasant place to walk as you walk along the river. The Millennium, the Jubilee, the Memorial Park ought to be a very beautiful space within the heart of the town. So, what are the highlights? Well, the highlights of the historic centre. The views across the river. If you look at any historic painting, it always picks up this part of Maidstone as being historic core. It's got the Loch Meadow Entertainment Centre, an awful lot going on there, and it's got very close links to the high street across Maidstone Bridge. But then again, there are the negatives. It's liable to flooding, as we all know, and we need to accommodate that. It's sites of antisocial behaviour. It's unlit after dark, which makes it perception of it to be a pretty unsafe place to be, which is why even during the day you don't really get very many people down there. And it ought to be an access footpath that crosses from the east to the west bank using that rather elegant footbridge. So what we're proposing is, and I say proposing, this is very initial ideas, of lifting up a kind of boardwalk walkway, cutting slots in that concrete riverbank to allow the water to ebb and flow in and out, to greatly increase the biodiversity of the river and the riverbank and the planting, and to create it somewhere that's just a much more beautiful and nice place to go to. You need to make much more of the entrance to it from Maidstone Bridge. You come across here, you can see, in my view, you should create a much better entrance to it up by Untitled Restaurant, the Law Court. At the moment, it's quite convoluted to get to it. But once you're down on the river, you've got the best views of Maidstone, what really ought to be a really beautiful piece of walkway. You've got effectively a riverside park there, linking with a footbridge to the Memorial Gardens on the other side. Any green space in the town centre ought to be something that is treasured, and particularly somewhere that's potentially as beautiful as this. Yeah, there are issues to it, mostly access on the far end of it. It should form part of a greater whole of the river, the Medway Walkway. There is a difficulty getting round the Tilegood Restaurant, getting over Maidstone Bridge and on the underpass and continuing the walk, but I think the entrance to it could be much, much better. So what we would look to do is primarily to do this with subtle lighting and increasing the biodiversity of the site. Now, in some people's eyes, these two things can be mutually exclusive. I think done well and done properly, it can enhance both. What we would look to do is to increase the perception of safety there, to get more people there, get more people across from the town centre, which in turn would reduce antisocial behaviour, create a seamless link between the east and the west banks, encourage footfall and activation after dark so we can get more use out of Loch Meadow. And I think, in my view, most importantly, create a sense of civic pride for the area. That group of buildings is really very, very beautiful. That church is stunning. That riverside walkway that you're looking there is very, very beautiful. The other bank needs to be the same, I think, and I think we need to celebrate the historical architectural features of the space and create a really memorable space. And we can do this by creating an identity for the space and a character for the space. It needs to be flexible. It's not about just flooding the space with light. That is a crude and energy inefficient way of doing it. It's about subtly picking out certain areas and certain themes and features of the place. It also needs to be buildable. It's a big area. It needs to be energy efficient. It needs to be safe. And it needs to provide value for money. And I think all of this can be done through a clever, relatively small scale architectural interventions and really, subtle use of lighting to encourage people to hang out and be there. The lighting temperature and the intensity of light is absolutely key to it. Different colour temperatures encourage or discourage different things, and it's using different light temperatures, different lighting effects to create different ideas and different effects. These are some precedent studies that Chris and I pulled together, and these give you ideas about how you can light plants, how you can light trees, how you can subtly low-level light walkways, and you can use different intensities of light to do different things. You can light natural spaces, you can light hard landscaping areas, and this is just a selection of different themes and ideas that I think we could pick up. You can light historic buildings. As you do on the other side, you can light bridges, and you can light walkways and trees and plants and paving and everything. It just needs to be done in a way that is creative. And these are a few more precedents we pulled together to show how it can be done in a very subtle kind of way. So in conclusion, then what we would look at be doing is creating this walkway in this river edge that encourages the water to ebb and flow through it, to raise the walkway out, to deal with the flooding, to get more people on it at different times of year, to enhance the biodiversity of the site, to create a new entrance from the Maidstone Bridge down to it, to create a place to actually go to link Jubilee Walk here, to link the pedestrian footbridge, to link the Memorial Park, and to link the Archbishop's Palace and the Saints Church. And in this image here, which again refers back to all the historic lithographs and prints and paintings you see, this ought to be one of the nicest parts of Maidstone, and I really think it has the potential to be so. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions, Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that presentation. Actually, I think there's an awful lot of bright ideas in there. There's no way we're going to do justice to considering it in any further detail this evening. So I'm moving that you leave us to contemplate that and it be adjourned to the next meeting for further discussion.
Of course.
Can I just say that the Any Questions picture looks brilliant because it hasn't got a burnt-out restaurant in it.
It's been greened out.
You started to do it already. You're improving it.
I do like the lily pads though and the reeds. I do like that very much. Councillor Harper, did you want to say something?
I just want. I mean, obviously we can't. It's not going to be discussed tonight. But I just wonder what the time scale you were thinking of, Alexa, with this whole sort of project. I mean, obviously.
Yes. Sorry, Laura. I've got the echo again. It's a long project. I don't think it's a short project at all, Councillor Harper. Obviously, there's going to have to be surveys done. We're going to have to involve the Environment Agency. There's lots of different people to speak to. And then what I think would then happen is we pull together a proposal and look for all different sources of funding. So I don't think it's a quick fix if we're going to do it properly. It's going to be expensive, but I think we'll be able to attract some good levels of funding for it.
If you come with a report in February, which is when we're planning our next sort of main meeting, would you have more information for us to look at, the wider scope of this then, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, there is work that needs to be done. There's surveys, and we'll have to identify, a pot of funding to do that, to take it to the next stage. But I think really for what we wanted for the committee today, or perhaps for the next meeting, because I understand that there's not enough time, is kind of, is this the right way to go? Do you support this look and feel, so that we can start investigating it further?
I think you're on the right lines, Alexa, in terms of the look and feel so far. Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, what's been wrong with this, when it got built originally, they never allowed for the river to flow back out. Usually you put holes in a concrete roll so the river can come in and it flows back out, and they never did that. So raising the level is fantastic. Having the entrance a bit better by Ty Orchid, fantastic. And people will be, because there isn't a bit where you can sit and enjoy the river. Obviously, we won't want too many trees there, and I know Mark Green, once the restaurant is gone, is going to survey that wall along by Old Palace because it's in a bit of a state, because we don't want that disappearing and undermining the Old Palace. So there's a lot going on at the moment, and I absolutely think if we had something like that, people of Maidstone could go into the town, go into Loch Meadow, go to the Tilewood, enjoy that bit of the river, because we'll have something they can enjoy for a change. Thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close it there. Thanking you very much indeed. Thanking you very much, Alexa, for that. You're in the right direction. We look forward to the next report. Thank you very much indeed, members. I now declare this meeting closed.